Fuck this. I'm done. No.
Get. No! This way, this way, this way, this way, this way, this way! How? What are you doing up there, you Spider-Man?
Alright, let's line this up. Let's not fuck up this stuff. What? That's a clip.
Get I banish you to the shadow realm. The time is now.
George, you didn't tell me he had a third, second form!
And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Daring Player Squad. Fuck. That's how it's gonna be. That's how it's gonna be right off the bat. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Daring Player Squad. My name is James, and we're doing a very special story time tonight. Valander, thank you for the Twitch Prime, or for the Twitch Prime subscription. Thank you so much. That's fucking awesome. I will try to make this good. And yeah, that's fine. Double checking that. That is not how you spell that. That's supposed to say test. Got you, bro. Love you guys. I'm so glad you're enjoying, you're having fun at our channel. We're a pretty easygoing channel for the most part. We like to not take ourselves too seriously. Turn down the lights. We gotta do this, or are you afraid of the dark side? Normally I would, but Ash is actually working on her resin right now. She's got a soldering iron behind me. Let's see. Can we get... Well, that's how we get everything. Let's see. Can we see Ash? There's Ash. There's Ash. Right there. Right there. So, we're not going to go full Are You Afraid of the Dark? If Ash finishes up... Yeah, when Ash is done, maybe we'll kill the lights and we'll have a wacky, hilarious old time. But in the meantime, hope you all enjoy the look of things. That's fair, yeah. Just throw a blanket over, same effect, just... Yeah, that's okay. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, so, this was the thing I really wanted to do next week on the 30th, so the night before Halloween. I thought that'd be a really good idea to do a spooky story night. I'm gonna change that a little bit. But I finished Resident Evil 3 and I didn't really know what the hell I was going to do today, so I was like, alright, let's just read things now. And that'll be just as fun. So, I've got an eclectic little group of stories tonight. Let's see. We got one, kind of science gone wrong story. We got a social commentary on tradition over whatever story. We got a couple really famous, what do you even call that? Just famous, iconic, like, terrifying, horrifying stories. I don't know how long these are even going to take to read, but we'll see what happens. Science didn't go wrong. It went horrifically right. Maybe a little bit. So we'll do a lot of that. Some speculative stuff. If we want, we might go into some other... I did finish the story, but as YouTube animation is coming on Halloween... Oh, yo, that's gonna be awesome! Everyone, Faye is doing some little animations on YouTube and stuff. She actually did an animation of a piece from RE3 the other day. I heard you might do RE7 next, and I just wanted to toss out there that I support this. Never played it, I'd love to see it. Excited about the stories. Let's go! I'm gonna turn down the volume a little bit on the... How actually? I've got some music playing off of YouTube. Lol, James reading the Blobby Boy note. I love the Blobby Boy note. How does the audio feel? You guys feel pretty comfy? The music is set in atmosphere. It's not overpowering. You guys are pretty happy with that? I'll leave it at that, and I'll just turn my own audio down, which unfortunately does mean that when the jump scare notifications pop in, I won't necessarily get quite as jump scared. And I know y'all be very sad about that. So actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to up the desktop audio that goes to stream, and then I will put down the volume of that one a little bit. That's an ad. That's disappointing. You're also watching Seb's YouTube live. Oh, he's streaming live on YouTube right now? Oh, that's good. Good man, good man. Good old Seb. I actually just realized that his Phasmophobia stream that they did the other day, I didn't realize that was it because it said Tony Hawk. Or someone done goofed there. But yeah, at the end of this, we'll see what the time is, but along with the two science gone wrong stories and the people are fucked up story, I do have a little bit of a ghost story written by this guy. Once upon a time, some years ago. I still stand by. I think it's pretty good. I think it holds up pretty well. I don't cringe when I read it, so I think it's okay. So, end it tonight. Let's see where we are, and let's see if we can end on that. Written? No, it happened to a friend of a friend. Maybe. Oh, funny. That was definitely one of the ones I was saving for next week. But, you know, let's see what we do, hey? So, let us get started. You can probably already see I got a little thingy in the... I got a 10 out of 11 on music test. That is okay. Well done, Faye. Thank you. Congratulations. 10 out of 11. That is good stuff. Anyways, as you can see, we already have the first story queued up. It is Royal Jelly by Road Doll, Mr. The Twits, Mr. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. He wrote a lot of stories. He's got a lot of stuff. Now, you know, he kind of a fucked up guy. Like next week we're gonna read some extra fucked up stuff. But you know, Road Doll, he do okay. He does okay. So I got my glass of Fresca. I got my office chair with the reclining thingy for the legs. And let's go, eh? Author James and Radioactive Insects and the Mutant Peach. The one and the same. So as we read stories, it's very possible I won't read the comments too hard. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. That's totally cool. I'll probably get back to you guys in between the breaks, right? So, let's go. Royal Jelly by Road Doll. I need to be more upright. I can't recline too much or else I'm gonna have no posture. Okay. Turn the volume down a little bit there. Okay. It worries me to death, Albert. It really does, Mrs. Taylor said. She kept her eyes fixed on the baby who was now lying absolutely motionless in the crook of her left arm. I just know there's something wrong. The skin on the baby's face had a pearly, translucent quality and was stretched very tightly over the bones. Try again, Albert Taylor said. It won't do any good. You have to keep trying, Mabel, he said. She lifted the bottle out of the saucepan of hot water and shook a few drops of milk onto the inside of her wrist, testing for temperature. Come on, she whispered. Come on, my baby. Wake up and take a bit more of this. There was a small lamp on the table close by that made a soft yellow glow all around her. Please, she said. Just take a weeny bit more. The husband watched her over the top of his magazine. She was half dead with exhaustion. He could see that. And the pale oval face, usually so grave and serene, had taken on a kind of pinched and desperate look. But even so, the drop of her head as she gazed down at the child was curiously beautiful. You see, she murmured, it's no good. She won't have it. She held the bottle up to the light, squinting at the calibrations. 1 ounce, 29 grams again. That's all she takes. No, it isn't even that. It's only 3/4. It's not enough to keep body and soul together. Albert, it really isn't. It worries me to death. I know, he said. If only they could find out what was wrong. There's nothing wrong, Mabel. It's just a matter of time. Of course there's something wrong. Dr. Robinson says no. Look, she said, standing up. You can't tell me it's natural for a 6-week-old child to weigh less by more than 2 whole pounds, than she did when she was born. Just look at those legs. They're nothing but skin and bone. The tiny baby lay limply on her arm, not moving. Dr. Robinson said you have to stop worrying, Mabel. So did that other one. Ha, she said. Isn't that wonderful? I'm to stop worrying. Now, Mabel. What does he want me to do? Treat it as some sort of a joke? He didn't say that. I hate doctors. I hate them all, she cried. And she swung away from him and walked quickly out of the room towards the stairs, carrying the baby with her. Albert Taylor stayed where he was and let her go. In a little while, he heard her moving about the bedroom directly over his head, quick, nervous footsteps going tap, tap, tap on the linoleum above. Soon, the footsteps would stop, and then he would have to get up and follow her. And when he went into the bedroom, he would find her sitting beside the cot as usual, staring at the child and crying softly to herself and refusing to move. She's starving, Albert, she would say. Of course she's not starving. She is starving. I know she is. And Albert? Yes? I believe you know it too, but you won't admit it. Isn't that right? Every night now it was like this. Last week they had taken the child back to the hospital, and the doctor had examined it carefully and told them there was nothing to matter. It took us 9 years to get this baby, Mabel had said. I think it would kill me if anything would happen to her, should happen to her. That was 6 days ago, and since then it has lost another 5 ounces. But worrying about it wasn't going to help anybody, Albert Taylor told himself. One simply had to trust a doctor on a thing like this. He picked up the magazine that was still lying on his lap and glanced idly down the list of contents to see what it had to offer this week. Among the bees in May, honey cookery, the bee farmer and the bee farm, experiences in the control of nosema, the latest on royal jelly, this week in the apiary, the healing power of propolis, regurgitations, British beekeepers' annual dinner, association news. All his life, Albert Taylor had been fascinated by anything that had to do with bees. As a small boy, he often used to catch them in his bare hands and go running with them into the house to show to his mother. And sometimes he would put them on his face and let them crawl about over his cheeks and neck. And the astonishing thing about it was that he never got stung. On the contrary, the bees seemed to enjoy being with him. They never tried to fly away, and to get rid of them he would have to brush them off gently with his fingers. Even then, they would frequently return and settle again on his arm or hand or knee, any place where the skin was bare. As he grew older, Albert Taylor's fascination with bees developed into an obsession, and by the time he was 12, he had built his first hive. The following summer, he had captured his first swarm. 2 years later, at the age of 14, he had no less than 5 hives standing neatly in a row against the fence in his father's small backyard. He never had to use smoke when there was work to do inside the hive, and he never wore gloves on his hands or a net over his head. Clearly there was some strange sympathy between this boy and the bees, and down in the village, in the shops and pubs, they began to speak about him with a certain kind of respect. And people started coming to the house to buy honey. When he was 18, he had rented 1 acre of rough pasture, and there he had set out to establish his own business. Now, 11 years later, he was still in the same spot, but he had 6 acres of ground instead of 1, 240 well-stocked hives, and a small house he built mainly with his own hands. He had married at the age of 20, and that, apart from the fact that it had taken them over 9 years to get a child, had also been a success. In fact, everything had gone pretty well for Albert until this strange little baby girl came along and started frightening them out of their wits by refusing to eat properly and losing weight every day. He looked up from the magazine and began thinking about his daughter. This evening, for instance, when she had opened her eyes at the beginning of the feed, she had gazed into them and seen something that frightened him to death. A kind of misty, vacant stare, as though the eyes themselves were not connected to the brain at all, or just lying loose in their sockets like a couple of small gray marbles. Did those doctors really know what they were talking about? One could always take her along to another hospital, somewhere in Oxford, perhaps. They're English. He might suggest that to Mabel when he went upstairs. He could still hear her moving around in the bedroom, but she must have taken off her shoes now and put on slippers because the noise was very faint. He switched his attention back to the magazine and went on with his reading. He finished an article called Experiences in the Control of Nosema, then turned over the page and began reading the next one. The latest on royal jelly. He doubted very much whether there would be anything in this that he didn't already know. What is this wonderful substance called royal jelly? Royal jelly is a glandular secretion produced by the nurse bees to feed the larvae immediately after they have hatched from the egg. The pharyngeal glands of bees produce the substance in much the same way as the mammary glands of vertebrates produce milk. The fact is of great biological interest because no other insects in the world are known to have evolved such a process. All old stuff, he told himself, but for want of anything better to do, he continued to read. Royal jelly is fed in concentrated form to all bee larvae for the first 3 days after hatching from the egg. But beyond that point, for all those who are destined to become drones or workers, this precious food is greatly diluted with honey and pollen. On the other hand, the larvae which are destined to become queens are fed throughout the whole of their larva period on a concentrated diet of pure royal jelly. Hence the name. Above him, up in the bedroom, the noise of footsteps had stopped altogether. The house was quiet. Royal jelly must be a substance of tremendous nourishing power, for on this diet alone, the honeybee larva increases in weight 1,500 times in 5 days. This is as if a 7.5-pound baby should increase in that time to 5 tons. Albert Taylor stopped and read that sequence again. He read it a third time. This is as if a 7.5-pound baby. Mabel! He cried, jumping up from his chair. Mabel, come here! He went up and out into the hall and stood at the foot of the stairs, calling for her to come down. There was no answer. Hello, Wayward. He ran up the stairs and switched on the light in the landing. The bedroom door was closed. He crossed the landing and opened it and stood in the doorway looking into the dark room. Mabel, he said, come downstairs a moment, will you please? I've just had a bit of an idea. It's about the baby. The light from the landing behind him cast a faint glow over the bed, and he could see her dimly now, lying on her stomach with her face buried in the pillow and her arms up over her head. She was crying again. Mabel, he said, going over to her, touching her shoulder. Please come down a moment. This may be important. Go away, she said. Leave me alone. Don't you want to hear about my idea? Oh, Albert, I'm so tired, she sobbed. I'm so tired. Fuck! Wayward jump scared me. Where are we? Thank you, Wayward. I'm so tired I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I don't think I can go on. That's a Grammarly ad. Come on, Grammarly, don't do that. Maybe I need to find actual music later. I don't think I can go on. I don't think I can stand it. There was a pause. Albert Taylor turned away from her and walked slowly over to the cradle where the baby was lying and peered in. What time is the next feed? He asked. 2 o'clock, I suppose. And the one after that? 6 in the morning. I'll do them both, he said. You go to sleep. She didn't answer. You get properly into bed, Mabel, and go straight to sleep, you understand? And stop worrying. I'm taking over completely for the next 12 hours. You'll give yourself a nervous breakdown going on like this. Yes, she said. I know. I'm taking the nipper and myself and the alarm clock into the spare room at this very moment, so you just lie down and relax and forget all about us, right? Already he was pushing the cradle out through the door. Oh, Albert, she sobbed. Don't worry about a thing. Leave it to me. Albert, yes? I love you, Albert. I love you too, Mabel. Now go to sleep. Yes, you did startle me. Albert Taylor didn't see his wife again until nearly 11 o'clock the next morning. Good gracious me, she cried, rushing down the stairs and dressing around in slippers. Albert, just look at the time! I must have slept 12 hours at least. Is everything all right? What happened? He was sitting quietly in his armchair, smoking a pipe and reading the morning paper. The baby was in a sort of carry cot on the floor at his feet, sleeping. Hello, dear, he said, smiling. She ran over to the cot and looked in. Did she take anything, Albert? How many times have you fed her? She was due for another one at 10 o'clock. Did you know that? Albert Taylor folded the newspaper neatly into a square and put it away on the side table. I fed her at 2 in the morning, he said, and she took about half an ounce, no more. I fed her again at 6 and she did a bit better that time. 2 ounces. 2 ounces? Oh, Albert, that's marvelous! And we just finished the last feed 10 minutes ago. There's the bottle on the mantelpiece. Only 1 ounce left. She drank 3. How's that? He was grinning proudly, delighted with his achievement. The woman quickly got down on her knees and peered at the baby. Doesn't she look better? He asked eagerly. Doesn't she look fatter in the face? It may sound silly, the wife said, but actually I think she does. Oh, Albert, you're a marvel. How did you do it? She's turning the corner, he said. That's all it is. Just like the doctor prophesied, she's turning the corner. I pray to God you're right, Albert. Of course I'm right. From now on, you watch her go. The woman was gazing lovingly at the baby. You look a lot better yourself too, Mabel. I feel wonderful. I'm sorry about last night. Let's keep it this way, he said. I'll do all the night feeds in the future. You do the day ones. She looked up at him across the cot, frowning. No, she said. Oh, no, I wouldn't allow you to do that. I don't want you to have a breakdown, Mabel. I won't. Not now. I've had some sleep. Much better we share it. No, Albert, this is my job and I intend to do it. Last night won't happen again. All right, he said. In that case, I'll just relieve you of the donkey work. I'll do all the sterilizing and mixing of the food and getting everything ready. That'll help you a bit anyway. I've been thinking that up until last night, I've never even raised a finger to help you with this baby. That isn't true. Oh, yes it is. So I've decided that from now on, I'm going to do my share of the work. That's an ad. Let's go. Let's restart. Where was that? I'm going to do my share of the work. I'm going to be the feed mixer and the bottle sterilizer, right? It's very sweet of you, dear, but I really don't think it's necessary. Come on, he cried. Don't change the luck. I've done it the last 3 times, and just look what happened. When's the next one? 2 o'clock, isn't it? Yes. It's all mixed, he said. Everything's all mixed and ready, and all you've got to do when the time comes is to go out there to the larder and take it off the shelf and warm it up. That's some help, isn't it? The woman got up off her knees and went over to him and kissed him on the cheek. You're such a nice man, she said. I love you more and more every day. I know you. Every day I know you. I fucked up. Later, in the middle of the afternoon, when Albert was outside in the sunshine working among the hives, he heard her calling to him from the house. Albert! She shouted. Albert, come here! He started forward to... The baby gets so fat it blows up. He started toward to meet her, wondering what was wrong. Oh, Albert, guess what? What? I've just finished giving her the 2 o'clock feed and she's taken the whole lot. No. Every drop of it. Oh, Albert, I'm so happy. She's going to be all right. She's turned the corner just like you said. She came up to him and threw her arms around his neck and hugged him, and he clapped her on the back and laughed and said what a marvelous little mother she was. Naturally, there was a certain amount of suspense in the air as the time approached for the 6 o'clock feed. By 5:30, both parents were already seated in the living room, waiting for the moment to arrive. The bottle with the milk formula in it was standing in a saucepan of warm water on the mantelpiece. The baby was asleep in its carry cot on the sofa. At 20 minutes to 6, it woke up and started screaming its head off. There you are, Mrs. Taylor cried. She's asking for the bottle. Pick her up quick, Albert, and hand her to me here. Give me the bottle first. He gave her the bottle, then placed the baby on the woman's lap. Cautiously, she touched the baby's lips with the end of the nipple. The baby seized the nipple between its gums and began to suck ravenously with a rapid, powerful action. Oh, Albert, isn't it wonderful? It's terrific, Mabel. In 7 or 8 minutes, the entire contents of the bottle had disappeared down the baby's throat. You clever girl, Mrs. Taylor said. 4 ounces again. Albert Taylor was leaning forward in his chair, peering intently into the baby's face. You know what, he said. She even seems as though she's put on a touch of weight already. What do you think? The mother looked down at the child. Doesn't she seem bigger and fatter to you, Mabel, than she was yesterday? Maybe she does, Albert. I'm not sure. Although, actually, there couldn't be any real gain in such a short time as this. The important thing is that she's eating normally. She's turned the corner, Albert said. I don't think you need to worry about her anymore. I certainly won't. You want me to go up and fetch the cradle back into our bedroom, Mabel? Yes, please, she said. Albert went upstairs and moved the cradle. The woman followed with the baby, and after changing its nappy, she laid it gently down on its bed. Then she covered it with sheet and blanket. Doesn't she look lovely, Albert? She whispered. Isn't that the most beautiful baby you've ever seen in your entire life? After they had finished eating, the parents settled themselves in armchairs in the living room. Albert with his magazine and his pipe, Mrs. Taylor with her knitting. Albert, she said after a while. Yes, dear? What was it you were going to tell me last night when you came rushing up to the bedroom? You said you had an idea for the baby. Albert Taylor lowered the magazine to his lap and gave her a long, sly look. Did I? He said. Yes. She waited for him to go on, but he didn't. What's the big joke? She asked. Why are you grinning like that? It's a joke, all right, he said. Tell it to me, dear. I'm not sure I ought to, he said. You might call me a liar. She had seldom seen him looking so pleased with himself as he was now, and she smiled back at him, egging him on. I'd just like to see your face when you hear it, Mabel. That's all. Albert, what is all this? He paused, refusing to be hurried. You do think the baby is better, don't you? He asked. Of course I do. You agree with me that all of a sudden she's feeding marvelously and looking 100% different. I do, Albert, yes. That's good, he said, the grin widening. You see, it's me that did it. Did what? I cured the baby. Yes, dear, I'm sure you did. Mrs. Taylor went right on with her knitting. You don't believe me, do you? Of course I believe you, Albert. I give you all the credit, every bit of it. Then how did I do it? Well, she said, pausing a moment to think. I suppose it's simply that you're a brilliant feed mixer. Ever since you started mixing the feeds, she's got better and better. You mean there's some sort of an art in mixing the feeds? Apparently there is. I'll tell you a secret, he said. You're absolutely right. Although, mind you, it isn't so much how you mix it that counts. It's what you put in. You realize that, don't you, Mabel? Mrs. Taylor stopped knitting and looked up sharply at her husband. Albert, she said. Don't tell me you've been putting things into that child's milk. He sat there grinning. Well, have you or haven't you? It's possible, he said. I don't believe you. He had a strange, fierce way of grinning that showed his teeth. Albert, she said, stop playing with me like this. Yes, dear, all right. You haven't really put anything into her milk, have you? Answer me properly, Albert. This could be serious with such a tiny baby. The answer is yes, Mabel. Albert Taylor, how could you? Now, don't get excited, he said. I'll tell you all about it if you really want me to. For heaven's sake, keep your hair on. It was... beer, she cried. I just know it was beer. Don't be so daft, Mabel, please. Then what was it? I have no consistency with his voice. I feel bad about that. Lady, you wish it was beer. Lancer, you know the story? It's a good one. Albert laid his pipe down carefully on the table beside him and leaned back in his chair. Tell me, he said, did you ever by any chance happen to hear me mentioning something called royal jelly? I did not. It's magic, he said. Pure magic. And last night I suddenly got the idea that if I was to put some of this into the baby's milk... How dare you! Now, Mabel, you don't even know what it is yet. I don't care what it is, she said. You can't go putting foreign bodies like that into a tiny baby's milk. You must be mad. It's perfectly harmless, Mabel. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. It comes from bees. I might have guessed that. And it's so precious that practically no one can afford to take it. When they do, it's only one little drop at a time. And how much did you give to our baby, might I ask? Ah, he said. That's the whole point. That's where the difference lies. I reckon that our baby, just in the last 4 feeds, has already swallowed about 50 times as much royal jelly as anyone else in the world has ever swallowed before. How about that? Albert, stop pulling my leg. I swear it, he said proudly. She sat there staring at him, her brow wrinkled, her mouth slightly open. You know what this stuff actually costs, Mabel, if you want to buy it? There's a place in America advertising it for sale this very moment for something like $500 a pound jar. $500! That's more than gold, you know. She hadn't the faintest idea what he was talking about. I'll prove it, he said, and jumped up and went across the large bookcase where he kept all his literature about bees. He took down the last issue of the American Bee Journal and turned to a page of small classified advertisements in the back. Here you are, he said. Exactly as I told you. We sell royal jelly, $480 per pound jar, wholesale. He handed her the magazine so she could read it herself. Now do you believe me? This is an actual shop in New York, Mabel. It says so. It doesn't say you can go stirring it into the milk of a practically newborn baby, she said. I don't know what's come over you, Albert. I really don't. It's curing her, isn't it? I'm not sure about that now. Don't be damn silly, Mabel. You know it is. Then why haven't other people done it with their babies? I keep telling you, he said. It's too expensive. Practically nobody in the world can afford to buy royal jelly just for eating except maybe 1 or 2 multi-millionaires. The people who buy it are the big companies that make women's face creams and things like that. They're using it as a stunt. They mix a tiny pinch of it into a big jar of face cream, and it's selling like hotcakes for absolutely enormous prices. They claim it takes out the wrinkles. And does it? How on earth would I know that, Mabel? Anyway, he said, returning to his chair, that's not the point. The point is this. I've done so much good to our little baby in just the last few hours that I think we ought to go right on giving it to her. Now, don't interrupt, Mabel. Let me finish. I've got 240 hives out there, and if I turn over maybe 100 of them into making royal jelly, we ought to be able to supply her with all she wants. Albert Taylor, the woman said, stretching her eyes wide and staring at him. Have you gone out of your mind? Just hear me through, will you please? I forbid it, she said. Absolutely. You're not to give my baby another drop of that horrid jelly, you understand? Now, Mabel, do me a favor, will you? He said. Let me explain some of the marvelous things this stuff does. You haven't even told me what it is yet. All right, Mabel, I'll do that too. Will you listen? Will you give me a chance to explain it? She sighed and picked up her knitting once more. I suppose you might as well get it off your chest, Albert. Go on and tell me. He paused, a bit uncertain how to begin. It wasn't going to be easy to explain something like this to a person with no detailed knowledge of apiculture at all. You know, don't you, he said, that each colony only has one queen. Yes. And that this queen lays all the eggs? Yes, dear, that much I know. All right. Now, the queen can actually lay two different kinds of eggs. She can lay eggs that produce drones, and she can lay eggs that produce workers. Now, if that isn't a miracle, Mabel, I don't know what is. Yes, Albert, all right. The drones are all the males. We don't have to worry about them. The workers are the females. So is the queen, of course. Now, what happens is this. The queen crawls around on the comb and lays her eggs in what we call cells. She lays one egg to each cell, and in 3 days, each of these eggs hatches out into a tiny grub. We call it larva. Now, as soon as this larva appears, the nurse bees, they're young workers, all crowd around and start feeding it like mad. And you know what they feed it on? Royal jelly, Mabel answered patiently. Right, he said. That's exactly what they do feed it on. They get this stuff out of a gland in their heads and they start pumping it into the cell to feed the larva. And what happens then? You want to know what happens then? He asked, wetting his lips. I can hardly wait. Royal jelly, he read aloud, must be a substance of tremendous nourishing power, for on this diet alone the honeybee larva increases in weight 1,500 times in 5 days. How much? 1,500 times, Mabel. And you know what that means if you put it in terms of a human being? It means, he said, lowering his voice, leaning forward, fixing her with those small, pale eyes. It means that in 5 days, a baby weighing 7.5 pounds to start off with could increase in weight to 5 tons. For the second time, Mrs. Taylor stopped knitting. Now, you mustn't take that too literally, Mabel. Who says I mustn't? It's just a scientific way of putting it, that's all. Very well, Albert. Go on. But that's only half the story, he said. There's more to come. The really amazing thing about royal jelly, I haven't told you yet. I'm going to show you now how it can transform a plain, dull-looking little worker bee with practically no sex organs at all into a great, big, beautiful, fertile queen. Are you saying our baby is dull-looking and plain? She asked sharply. Did you know that the queen bee and the worker bee, although they are completely different when they grow up, are both hatched out of exactly the same kind of egg? I don't believe that, she said. It's as true as I'm sitting here, Mabel. Honest it is. Anytime the bees want the queen to hatch out of the egg instead of a worker, they can do it. How? Ha, he said, shaking a thick forefinger in her direction. That's just what I'm coming to. That's the secret of royal jelly. Now, what do you think it is, Mabel, that makes this happen? Royal jelly, you already told me. Royal jelly it is, he cried, clapping his hands and bouncing up on his seat. His big round face was glowing with excitement now, and 2 vivid patches of scarlet had appeared high up on each cheek. Here's how it works. I'll put it very simple for you. The bees want a new queen, so they build an extra large cell, a queen cell we call it, and they get the old queen to lay one of her eggs in there. The other 1,999 eggs she lays in ordinary worker cells. Now, as soon as these eggs hatch into larvae, the nurse bees rally round and start pumping in the royal jelly. All of them get it, workers as well as queen. But here's the vital thing, Mabel, so listen carefully. Here's where the difference comes. The worker larvae only receive the special marvelous food for the first 3 days of their larval life. After the 3rd day, they're put straight away onto more or less routine bee foods, a mixture of honey and pollen. And then about 2 weeks later, they emerge from the cells as workers. But not so the larva in the queen's cell. This one gets royal jelly all the way through its larval life. The nurse bees simply pour it into the cell. So much so, in fact, that the little larva is literally floating in it. And that's what makes it into a queen. You can't prove it, she said. Don't talk so damn silly, Mabel, please. Thousands of people have proved it time and time again. Famous scientists in every country in the world. And all you have to do is take a larva out of a worker cell and put it in a queen cell. And just so long as the nurse bees keep it well supplied with royal jelly, then presto, it'll grow up into a queen. And what makes it more marvelous still is the absolutely enormous difference between queen and a worker when they grow up. The abdomen is a different shape. The sting is different. The legs are different. It's pretty hard to believe, she said, that a food can do all that. Of course it's hard to believe. It's another of the miracles of the hive. He stood beside the bookcase with a magazine in his hand, smiling a funny little furtive smile of triumph, and his wife watched him, bewildered. He was not a tall man. He had a thick, plump, pulpy-looking body that was built close to the ground on abbreviated legs. The legs were slightly bowed. The head was huge and round, covered with bristly, short-cut hair. The greater part of the face, now that he had given up shaving altogether, was hidden by a brownish-yellow fuzz about an inch long. In one way and another, he was rather grotesque to look at. There was no denying in that. Looking at him now as he buzzed around in front of the bookcase with his bristly head and his hairy face and his pulpy body, she couldn't help thinking that somehow, in some curious way, there was a touch of the bee about this man. Up until now, it had never occurred to her that her husband might look like a bee. It shocked her a bit. You know something, she said, staring at him but smiling a little all the same. You're getting to look just a tiny bit like a bee yourself, did you know that? He turned around and looked at her. I suppose it's the beard, mostly, she said. I do wish you'd stop wearing it. Even the color is sort of bee-ish, don't you think? What the hell are you talking about, Mabel? Albert, she said, your language. Do you want to hear any more of this or don't you? Yes, dear, I'm sorry. I was only joking. Do go on. He turned away again and pulled another magazine out of the bookcase and began leafing through the pages. Now just listen to this, Mabel. Still in Bird, it found that a male rat, which hitherto had been unable to breed, upon receiving a minute daily dose of royal jelly, became a father many times over. Albert, she cried, this stuff's much too strong to give to a baby. I don't like it at all. Nonsense, Mabel. Listen, Mrs. Taylor said, interrupting him. I think the baby's crying. Albert glanced up from his reading. Sure enough, a lusty yelling noise was coming from the bedroom above. She must be hungry, he said. His wife looked at the clock. Good gracious me, she cried, jumping up. It's past her time again already. You mix the feed, Albert, quickly, while I bring her down. I don't want to keep her waiting. In half a minute, Mrs. Taylor was back, carrying the screaming infant in her arms. Do be quick, Albert, she called, settling herself into the armchair and arranging the child on her lap. Please hurry. Albert entered the kitchen and handed her the bottle of warm milk. It's just right, he said. You don't have to test it. She hitched the baby's head a little higher in the crook of her arm and pushed the rubber teat straight into the wide-open, yelling mouth. The baby grabbed the teat and began to suck. The yelling stopped. Mrs. Taylor relaxed. Oh, Albert, isn't she lovely? She's terrific, Mabel. Thanks to royal jelly. Now, dear, I don't want to hear another word about that nasty stuff. It frightens me to death. You're making a big mistake, he said. We'll see about that. The baby went on sucking the bottle. I do believe she's going to finish the whole lot again, Albert. I'm sure she is, he said. And a few minutes later, the milk was all gone. Oh, what a good girl you are, Mrs. Taylor cried as very gently she started to withdraw the nipple. The baby sensed what she was doing and sucked harder, trying to hold on. The woman gave a quick little tug and plop, out it came. Wah, 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 wah. That's how many wahs are written in the story. The baby yelled. Nasty old wind, Mrs. Taylor said, hoisting the child onto her shoulder and patting its back. It belched twice in quick succession. There you are, my darling. You'll be all right now. For a few seconds, the yelling stopped. Then it started again. Keep belching her, Albert said. She's drunk it too quickly. His wife lifted the baby back on her shoulder. She rubbed its spine. She changed it from one shoulder to another. She laid it on its stomach on her lap. She sat it up on her knee. But it didn't belch again, and the yelling became louder and more insistent every minute. Good for the lungs, Albert Taylor said, grinning. That's the way they exercise their lungs, Mabel. Did you know that? There, 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 the wife said, kissing it all over the face. There, there, there. They waited another 5 minutes, but not for one moment did the screaming stop. Change the nappy, Albert said. It's got a wet nappy, that's all it is. He fetched a clean one from the kitchen, and Mrs. Taylor took the old one off and put the new ones... Mrs. Taylor took the old one off and put the new one on. This made no difference at all. Wah! 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 The baby yelled. You didn't stick the safety pin through the skin, did you, Mabel? Of course I didn't, she said, feeling under the nappy with her fingers to make sure. The parents sat opposite one another in their armchairs, smiling nervously, watching the baby on the mother's lap, waiting for it to tire and stop screaming. You know what? Albert said last. What? I bet she's still hungry. I bet all she wants is another swig at that bottle. How about fetching me her an extra lot? I don't think we ought to do that, Albert. It'll do her good, he said, getting up from his chair. I'm going to warm her up a second helping. He went to the kitchen and was away for several minutes. When he returned, he was holding a bottle brimful of milk. I made her a double, he announced. 8 ounces, just in case. Albert, are you mad? Don't you know it's just as bad to overfeed as it is to underfeed? You don't have to give her the lot, Mabel. You can stop anytime you like. Go on, he said, standing over. Give her a drink. Mrs. Taylor began to tease the baby's lip with the end of the nipple. The tiny mouth closed like a trap over the rubber teat, and suddenly there was silence in the room. The baby's whole body relaxed, and a look of absolute bliss came over its face as she started to drink. There you are, Mabel. What did I tell you? The woman didn't answer. She's ravenous, that's what she is. Just look at her suck. Mrs. Taylor was watching the level of milk in the bottle. It was dropping fast, and before long, 3 or 4 ounces out of the 8 had disappeared. There, she said. That'll do. You can't pull it away now, Mabel. Yes, dear, I must. Go on, woman. Give her the rest and stop fussing. But, Albert, she's finished. Can't you see that? Go on, my beauty, he said. You finish that bottle. I don't like it, Albert, the wife said. But she didn't pull the bottle away. She's making up for lost time, Mabel. That's all she's doing. 5 minutes later, the bottle was empty. Slowly, Mrs. Taylor withdrew the nipple, and this time there was no protest from the baby. No sound at all. It lay peacefully on the mother's lap, the eyes glazed with contentment, the mouth half open, and the lips smeared with milk. 12 whole ounces, Mabel, Albert Taylor said. 3 times the normal amount. Isn't that amazing? The woman was staring down at the baby, and now the old, anxious, tight-lipped look of the frightened mother was slowly returning to her face. Come here, Albert, she said. What? I said come here. He went over and stood beside her. Take a good look and tell me if you see anything different. He peered closely at the baby. She seems bigger, Mabel, if that's what you mean. Bigger and fatter. Hold her, she ordered. Go on, pick her up. He reached out and lifted the baby up off the mother's lap. Good God, he cried. She weighs a ton! Exactly. Now, isn't that marvelous, he cried, beaming. I'll bet she must be back to normal already. It frightens me, Albert. It's too quick. Nonsense, woman. It's that disgusting jelly that's done it, she said. I hate the stuff. There's nothing disgusting about royal jelly, he answered, indignant. Don't be a fool, Albert. You think it's normal for a child to start putting on weight at this speed? You're never satisfied, he cried. You're scared stiff when she's losing, and now you're absolutely terrified because she's gaining. What's the matter with you, Mabel? The woman got up from her chair with the baby in her arms and started toward the door. All I can say is, she said, it's lucky I'm here to see you don't give her any more of it. That's all I can say. She went out, and Albert watched her through the open door as she crossed the hall to the foot of the stairs and started to ascend. And when she reached the 3rd or 4th step, she suddenly stopped and stood quite still for several seconds, as though remembering something. Then she turned around and came down again, rather quickly, and re-entered the room. Albert, she said. Yes? I assume there wasn't any royal jelly in this last feed we've just given her. I don't see why you should assume that, Mabel. Albert! What's wrong? He asked, soft and innocent. How dare you! She cried. Albert Taylor's great bearded face took on a painted and puzzled look. I think you ought to be very glad she's got another big dose of it inside her, he said. The woman was standing just inside the doorway, clasping the sleeping baby in her arms and staring at her husband with huge eyes. She stood very erect, her body absolutely stiff with fury, her face paler, more tight-lipped than ever. You mark my words, Albert was saying. You're going to have a nipper there soon that'll win first prize in any baby show in the entire country. Hey, why don't you weigh her in now and see what she is? You want me to get the scales, Mabel, so you can weigh her? The woman walked straight over to the large table in the center of the room and laid the baby down, and quickly started taking off its clothes. Yes, she snapped. Get the scales! Then she unpinned the nappy, and she drew it away, and the baby lay naked on the table. But Mabel, Albert cried, it's a miracle! She's fat as a puppy. The police are onto us. Indeed, the amount of flesh the child had put on since the day before was astounding. The small sunken chest with the rib bones showing all over it was now plump and round as a barrel, and the belly was bulging high in the air. Curiously, though, the arms and legs did not seem to have grown in proportion. Still short and skinny, they looked like little sticks protruding from a ball of fat. Look, Albert said, she's even beginning to get a bit of a fuzz in the tummy to keep her warm. He put out a hand and was about to run the tips of his fingers over the powdering of silky yellowy brown hairs that had suddenly appeared on the baby's stomach. Don't you touch her, the woman cried. She turned and faced him, her eyes blazing, and she looked suddenly like some kind of little fighting bird with her neck arched over towards him as though she were about to fly at his face and peck his eyes out. Now, wait a minute, he said, retreating. You must be mad, she cried. Now, wait just a minute, Mabel, will you please? Because if you're thinking this stuff is dangerous, that's what you're thinking, isn't it? All right, then. Listen carefully. I shall now proceed to prove to you once and for all, Mabel, that royal jelly is absolutely harmless to the human beings, even in enormous doses. For example, why do you think we had only half the usually honey crop last summer? Tell me that. His retreat, walking backwards, had taken him 3 or 4 yards away from her, where he seemed to be more comfortable. The reason we had only half the usual crop last summer, he said, slowly lowering his voice, was because I turned 100 of my hives over to the production of royal jelly. You what? Ah, he whispered. I thought that might surprise you a bit. And I've been making it ever since, right under your very nose. His small eyes were glinting at her, and a slow, sly smile was creeping around the corners of his mouth. You'll never guess the reason, either, he said. I've been afraid to mention it up till now, because I thought it might, well, sort of embarrass you. There was a slight pause. He had his hands clasped high in front of him, level with his chest, and he was rubbing one palm against the other, making a soft, scraping noise. You remember that bit I read you out of the magazine? That bit about the rat? Let me see now. How does it go? Still and Burdett found that a male rat which hitherto had been unable to breed... He hesitated, the grin widening, showing his teeth. You get the message, Mabel? She stood quite still, facing him. The very first time I ever read that sentence, I just jumped straight out of my chair and I said to myself, it'll work with a lousy rat. If it'll work with a lousy rat, I said, then there's no reason on earth why it shouldn't work with Albert Taylor. He paused again, craning his head forward and turning one ear slightly in his wife's direction, waiting for her to say something. But she didn't. And here's another thing, he went on. It made me feel so absolutely marvelous, Mabel, and so sort of completely different to what I was before, that I went right on taking it, even after you'd announced the joyful tidings. Buckets of it I must have swallowed during the last 12 months. The big, heavy, haunted-looking eyes of the woman were moving intently over the man's face and neck. There was no skin showing at all on the neck, not even at the sides below the ears. The whole of it, to a point where it disappeared into the collar of the shirt, was covered all the way around with those shortish hairs, yellowy black. Mind you, he said, turning away from her, her gazing lovingly now at the baby, it's going to work far better on a tiny infant than on a fully developed man like me. You've only got to look at her and see that, don't you agree? The woman's eyes traveled slowly downward and settled on the baby. The baby was lying naked on the table, fat and white and comatose, like some gigantic grub that was approaching the end of its larval life and would soon emerge into the world, complete with mandibles and wings. "Why don't you cover it up, Mabel?" he said. "We don't want our little queen to catch a cold." The end. That's a good one. I like that story. It's fucked up. Let's see what we got. What were Faye's guesses? God, the wife would stick up her ass. 5-ton baby. Oh god, both the husband and wife are fucked up. The baby's possessed. Did anyone hear about Jason Derulo and the BTS army? Not really surprised. I did not hear about Jason Derulo and the BTS army. Did they try to pick a fight with the BTS army? You don't do that.
Weird, because he did a video with NCT.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder. I did not hear about that. The baby's possessed and it's gonna kill the parents like that one video game. Oh no, the Popo was onto us, fuzzy baby. The baby turns into a bee? Kind of. The baby's gonna turn into a bee. I'm gonna have nightmares. Good fucking times, man. Good damn times. So that's story number 1. How you guys doing? You having a good time? Wait, excuse. So let's see, how long did that take us? So when did we start reading? That was about half an hour, maybe more. He didn't credit BTS on the Savage Love remixes on Twitter. Oh. Yeah, BTS aren't going to pick a fight about that. Alright, let's see. What do we got next? I'll give you a... I read enough literature to be unfazed by this one. Fair enough. Ooh, no, not that one. No, we're keeping that one. That one's for later. Okay. Got 2 options for you. Do you guys want a pretty long story, or do you want a really short story after that one? Both very, very famous stories. Very likely a lot of you have heard of these stories by this point. Maybe you haven't heard the story themselves. This other one is hella long, but could be fun. Okay, so we got 2 options. We got psychological horror, or we got like speculative, like bullshit fucked up horror. Psychological is short. Short, you want the short? Okay, we got 1 vote for short. We'll go with the short one first, get a bit of a break out of our systems. Yeah, we can do that. So, how many of you have actually read The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe? We all know the main gist of the story because of The Simpsons, I know. But how many of you have actually read the story? Let me see. Let me change the title of the shits. Scary Stories title. Edit that shit. Who? Oh, Faye, you were very young. Hold on, let me just get some proper info. 1940. I know what you did last summer. I'm 13. I only read manga. Okay, you might like this one. This one's cute. Okay, so we are no longer reading Royal Jelly by Roald Dahl. We are now reading The Telltale Heart from 1843. Read a creepy Pokemon story. They're good. I don't think I'm reading any Pokemon stories. Not quite. Telltale Heart, not by Roald Dahl. No. This is by Edgar Allan. That's not Allan Poe. Very famous American author. Play the Lavender Town theme. No, we could do that. Lavender Town theme. Now, is there like a super long version of it? Lavender Town for 10 hours. Done. We're gonna have some fucking nightmares, guys. Alright, so yes, The Telltale Heart Oh, I did not edit that properly at all. 1843 bracket. You are now too big. You don't fit in my cool little spot. I guess I just have to keep moving a bit louder. Can do. How's that feel? Oh, that's creepy. Alright. Alright, thank you for the audio heads up, sir. Alright. So, the Telltale Heart, made famous by a diorama on The Simpsons. Story itself is pretty fun. It's cute. It's just a little ADB thing. Yeah. So let's find out about The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. There's murder in this one. Alright. So, Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, 1843. American story. I remember the last time. I actually read this in high school, and we were supposed to write like a POV from a different character in the story. And I just assumed it was all English. I'm not sure anymore. They use the word mad a lot, and I like that. Yeah, we'll stick with North American. What is this song? When I play the game, people die or something else? Am I gonna die when I'm asleep? Yeah, this is the song. This is that one. This is the right song. That's Lavender Town for you. Alright, here we go. Telltale Heart, Edgar Allan Poe. One more sip of there. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I'm mad? The disease that sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them? Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken. And I observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain. But once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture. A pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take this life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. With what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed and no light shone out. And then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. Pause. I moved it slowly. Very, very slowly. So that I might not disturb that old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. Cautiously! For the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights. Every night, just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he had just passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as was startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with a thick darkness. The shutters were closed fastened, through fear of robbers. And so I knew that he would not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. Steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening. He was sitting up in the bed listening, just as I had done, night after night. Wait, I fucked up. I had my head in, and was just about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him. Although, I chuckled at heart. I knew that he'd been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only a mouse crossing the floor, or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence on the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a simple as dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out of the crevice and fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I directed the ray as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the sense? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet, I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray above upon the eve. The eye that says I. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now at the dead of hour of the night, amid the dreadful sounds of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once. Once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But, for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head, and the arms, and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber, and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all. Ha! Ha! When I had made an end to these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what have I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what have I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took visitors all over the house. I bade them search. Search well! I led them, at length, to this chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But, ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definiteness, until, at length, I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. What could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and grated it upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, louder, louder. Still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God. No. No, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. Derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die, and now, again, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains, I shrieked! Dissemble no more! I admit the deed! Tear up the planks! Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart! My throat hurts. So that's a short one, hey? Yeah. Are we still listening to Lavender Town? Okay, what time is this? 10, 20? The story's so creepy. It's a super famous one. Edgar Allan Poe is super famous to begin with. Telltale Heart. What's the other good one? The Raven. Raven's a good one. I read that in class once. That was a good one. Actually, no, my buddy read that one. We did the project together. I read a different story. I'll read this other story of that particular assignment next week, I think. Okay, I'm looking at the times, like 10 o'clock. That also got some stream. Yeah, it did. Okay. I kind of feel like I don't want to read the super long speculative horror thing. It's long. Quote the Raven, nevermore. That's the one. It's some good shit. So I think I'm gonna read this other one. This is a little bit shorter. It's another one I read in my English class back in high school. This one is also a very long time no see. Vicious Alley, hey, what's up? You came at a good time because I'm right in between telling stories, and we're about to start the next one, basically right now. So, if you know the story, then do creepy Pokemon story there. Not that long. No. The Finish Atena is a very special story. Very, very, very special story. But tonight, we got this one. If you're wondering, I was thinking about reading I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is like a super ultra fucked up story, and it's great. But it's long, and I see now it's 10 o'clock, so I don't know, maybe next week I need to start earlier. And we'll try to do a little bit better. So this time I'm going to read a different one. Again, this isn't like, it's not horror exactly, not this one. But it's pretty famous, and it's got a bit of a story direction when you realize where it's going, and then you go, oh shit. So this one, let me know if you heard it. This is, hold on, before I say what it is, let's get some backstory on this. Okay, so this is a story from 1948 by a woman named Shirley Jackson. It's called The Lottery. Who knows The Lottery? Who knows this one? Who has heard of The Lottery? Not me. Oh, you're gonna have a good time then. 1948. Not The Telltale Heart. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a story. The video game is super good too. I've heard, like, ever since I learned about the story of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, you read about it, and what was I saying? You find out about the game, and apparently it was a really good game, like point and click adventure game. And you love The Lottery. Oh, you know what's up. You know what's coming. Then I'm old like James. I know these stories, so you get to watch all the kids stress out. Shirley Jackson. I've done that as a moral dilemma for my characters in D&D. Oh. Fucking A, that's awesome. I dig it. I live in Vegas, I should know about gambling and lottery. You're gonna like this lottery then, Faye. You're gonna really like this one. But yeah, the cool thing with the game version of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is that the voice of the the evil supercomputer that is ruining their lives. What's his name? Harlan Ellison. He actually did the voice of the evil supercomputer, and he like cranks it to 11 all the way through. So you look at videos of people playing, and it's like, this is a man just gleefully enjoying being evil, and it's pretty good. I was actually looking. I was trying to get some time for how long it would take to read that. Apparently, it can be done in like 40 minutes. Harlan Ellison has an audiobook version of it, and again, he's going in hard. So I have no mouth, but I must scream. I super recommend. But today we're gonna read The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. That's not The Lottery. That's my other story that I'm reading right now. That I'm writing right now, actually. Where'd you go, Lottery? Come back. There you are. Alright, so, where are we? We are in, old-timey USA, I believe. It's a great performance, yeah. Let's see, what song should we use for The Lottery? What's a nice unsettling song for The Lottery? Let's see. Unsettling music. YouTube, what do you got for me? Deeply disturbing music? Dark ambience? Horror background music? 10 hours? Strangely familiar places with unnerving music? Figure in the mist? No one spoil it for those who don't know. I think we got a pretty good group. I don't think anyone would spoil. 1 hour of dark piano music? Ooh, what is? 1 hour of dark piano music. But first, an ad for Cascade Platinum. And another ad for Gap. We need some super happy fun times music. Circus music. It was too ominous. Doki Doki Literature Club theme. That's actually fun. We're doing it. We're fucking doing it. Literature Club music. Not the musical. No, no, no. Relaxing Doki Doki Literature Club. I'm very curious to see if it's gonna, like, get all fucked up and shit. Alright, this might be the whole soundtrack. 32 minutes? That should be enough. There's some really good spooky lo-fi. We're gonna go with this shit. No, it's lottery day. This is an exciting day. This is a happy day. Everyone's been looking forward to this. No creepy. This music is low-key creepy. Hyper Lotto. This is totally like Lotto music. Hey, welcome, Lotto 649. Here we are. It's for the 11 p.m. draw. Let's go. The first numbers are 17, 4, 27. Anyways, let's get to it. The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely, and the grass was richly green. The people of the village began to gather in the square between the post office and the bank around 10 o'clock. In some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 26th. But in this village, where they were only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours. South Park made a spoof of the story involving Britney Spears, yeah. It's a famous one. Faye, this is a famous story. You go to school, you tell everyone about this story later. I'm here. Oh, Rashi, you arrived just in time for the lottery. VOD is gonna be pretty good though. We got some good shit. Fucking royal jelly. Oh, fucking telltale heart. Anyways, the lottery. All right, let's start again. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely, and the grass was richly green. The people of the village began to gather in the square between the post office and the bank around 10 o'clock. In some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 26th. But in this village, where there were only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours. So it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and still be through in time for all the villagers to get home for noon dinner. The children assembled first, of course. School was recently over for the summer, and the feeling of liberty sat uneasily on most of them. They tended to gather quietly together for a while before they broke into boisterous play, and their talk was still of the classroom and of the teacher, of books and reprimands. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones, and the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and roundest stones. Bobby and Harry Jones and Dickie Delacroix, the villagers pronounced his name Delacroix, eventually made a great pile of stones in one corner of the square and guarded against the raids of the other boys. The girls stood aside, talking amongst themselves, looking over their shoulders at the boys, and the very small children rolled in the dust or clung to the hands of their older brothers or sisters. This music is fantastic for the story. Soon the men began to gather, surveying their own children, speaking of planting and rain, tractors and taxes. They stood together, away from the pile of stones in the corner, and their jokes were quiet and they smiled rather than laughed. The women, wearing faded house dresses and sweaters, came shortly after their menfolk. They greeted one another and exchanged bits of gossip as they went to join their husbands. Soon the women, standing by their husbands, began to call to their children, and the children came reluctantly, having to be called 4 or 5 times. Bobby Martin ducked under his mother's grasping hand and ran, laughing, back to the pile of stones. Not the one you suggested yet, sir. No, not yet. Not yet, Rashi. That is... Where did I put that under? I think I put that one either... I think I put that under hosting. Let me see really quickly. If I host, I'm just gonna jump scare myself a second. Yep. So if anyone hosts, you get to scare me with that. Where was I? Bobby Martin ducked under his mother's grasping hand and ran, laughing, back for the pile of stones. His father spoke up sharply, and Bobby came quickly and took his place between his father and his oldest brother. The lottery was conducted, as were the square dances, the teen club, the Halloween program, by Mr. Summers, who had time and energy to devote to civic activities. He was a round-faced, jovial man, and he ran the coal business, and people were sorry for him because he had no children and his wife was a scold. When he arrived in the square carrying the black wooden box, there was a murmur of conversation among the villagers, and he waved and yelled, "Little late today, folks." The postmaster, Mr. Graves, followed him, carrying a 3-legged stool. And the stool was put in the center of the square, and Mr. Summers set the black box down on it. The villagers kept their distance, leaving a space between themselves and the stool. And when Mr. Summers said, "Some of you fellows want to give me a hand?" there was a hesitation before 2 men. Mr. Martin and his oldest son, Baxter, came forward to hold the box steady on the stool, while Mr. Summers stirred up the papers inside it. The original paraphernalia for the lottery had been lost long ago, and the black box now resting on the stool had been put into use even before Old Man Warner, the oldest man in town, was born. Mr. Summers spoke frequently to the villagers about making a new box, but no one liked to upset even as much tradition as was represented by the black box. There was a story that the present box had been made with some pieces of the box that had preceded it, the one that had been constructed when the first people settled down to make a village here. Every year after the lottery, Mr. Summers began talking again about a new box, but every year the subject was allowed to fade off without anything being done. The black box grew shabbier each year, and now is no longer completely black, but splintered badly along one side to show the original wood color, and in some places faded, or stained. Mr. Martin and his oldest son, Baxter, held the black box securely on the stool until Mr. Summers had stirred the papers thoroughly with his hand. Because so much of the ritual had been forgotten or discarded, Mr. Summers had been successful in having slips of paper substituted for the chips of wood that had been used for generations. Chips of wood, Mr. Summers had argued, had all been very well when the village was tiny, but now that the population was more than 300 and likely to keep on growing, it was necessary to use something that would fit more easily into the black box. The night before the lottery, Mr. Summers and Mr. Graves made up the slips of paper and put them in the box, and it was then taken to the safe of Mr. Summers' coal company and locked up until Mr. Summers was ready to take it to the square the next morning. The rest of the year, the box was put away, sometimes one place, sometimes another. It had spent 1 year in Mr. Graves' barn and another year underfoot in the post office, and sometimes it was set on a shelf in the Martin grocery and left there. There was a great deal of fussing to be done before Mr. Summers declared the lottery open. There were the lists to make up, of heads of families, heads of households in each family, members of each household in each family. There was the proper swearing in of Mr. Summers by the postmaster, as the official of the lottery. At one time, some people remembered there had been a recital of some sort, performed by the official of the lottery, a perfunctory, tuneless chant that had been rattled off duly each year. Some people believed that the official of the lottery used to stand just so when he said or sang it. Others believed he was supposed to walk among the people, but Years and years ago, this part of the ritual had been allowed to lapse. There had been also a ritual salute, which the official of the lottery had to use in addressing each person who came up to draw from the box. This also had changed with time until now it was felt necessary only for the official to speak to each person approaching. Mr. Summers was very good at all this. In his clean white shirt and blue jeans, with one hand resting carelessly on the black box, he seemed very proper and important as he talked interminably to Mr. Graves and the Martins. Just as Mr. Summers finally left off talking and turned to the assembled villagers, Mrs. Hutchinson came hurriedly along the path of the square, her sweater thrown over her shoulders and slid into place in the back of the crowd. "Clean forgot what day it was," she said to Mrs. Delacroix, who stood next to her, and they both laughed softly. "Though my old man was out back stacking wood," Mrs. Hutchinson went on. "And then I looked out the window and the kids was gone. And then I remembered it was the 27th and came a-running." I'm going to assume they have an accent. She dried her hands on her apron, and Mrs. Delacroix said, "You're in time, though. They're still talking away up there." Mrs. Hutchinson craned her neck to see through the crowd and found her husband and children standing near the front. She tapped Mrs. Delacroix on the arm as farewell and began to make her way through the crowd. The people separated good-humoredly to let her through. 2 or 3 people said, in voices just loud enough to be heard across the crowd, "Here comes your Mrs. Hutchinson." And, "Bill, she made it after all." Mrs. Hutchinson reached for her husband, and Mr. Summers, who had been waiting, said cheerfully, "Thought we were going to have to get on without you, Tessie," Mrs. Hutchinson said, grinning. "Wouldn't have me leave the dishes in the sink now, would you, Joe?" Canadian scare stories. Next week there will be an actual Canadian scare story. And not that scary, it's just kind of unsettling. It's a good one, though. Excuse me. And soft laughter ran through the crowd as the people stirred back into position after Mrs. Hutchinson's arrival. "Well now," Mr. Summers said soberly, "guess we better get started. Get this over with so's we can go back to work. Anybody ain't here?" Normal Canadian story. Canadian scare stories. The Tim Hortons washroom at the truck stop. Hey, I know that story. "Dunbar," several people said. "Dunbar, Dunbar." Mr. Summers consulted his list. "Clyde Dunbar," he said. "That's right. He's broke his leg, hasn't he? Who's drawing for him?" "Me, I guess," the woman said, and Mr. Summers turned to look at her. "Wife draws for her husband," Mr. Summers said. "Don't you have a grown boy to do it for you, Janie?" Although Mr. Summers and everyone else in the village knew the answer perfectly well, it was the business of the official of the lottery to ask such questions formally. Mr. Summers waited with an expression of polite interest while Mrs. Dunbar answered. "Horse is not but 16 yet," Mrs. Dunbar said regretfully. "Guess I got a fill-in for the old man this year." "Right," Mr. Summers said. He made a note on his list he was holding. Then he asked, "Watson boy drawing this year?" A tall boy in the crowd raised his hand. "Here," he said. "I'm drawing for my mother and me." He blinked his eyes nervously and ducked his head as several voices in the crowd said things like, "Good fella, Jack," and "Glad to see your mother's got a man to do it." "Well," Mr. Summers said, "guess that's everyone. Old man want to make it?" "Here," a voice said, and Mr. Summers nodded. A sudden hush fell on the crowd as Mr. Summers cleared his throat and looked at the list. "All ready," he called. "Now, I'll read the names. Heads of families first. And the men come and take paper out of the box. Keep the paper folded in your hand without looking at it until everyone has a turn. Everything clear?" The people had done it so many times that they only half listened to the directions. Most of them were quiet, wetting their lips, not looking around. Then Mr. Summers raised one hand high and said, "Adams!" A man disengaged himself from the crowd and came forward. "Hi, Steve," Mr. Summers said, and Mr. Adams said, "Hi, Joe." They grinned at one another humorously and nervously. Then Mr. Adams reached into the black box and took out a folded paper. He held it firmly by one corner as he turned and went hastily back to his place in the crowd, where he stood a little apart from his family, not looking down at his hand. "Allen," Mr. Summers said. "Anderson. Bentham." "Seems like there's no time at all between lotteries anymore," Mrs. Delacroix said to Mrs. Graves in the back row. "Seems like we got through with the last one only last week." "Time sure goes fast," Mrs. Graves said. "Clark. Delacroix. Delacroix. I can't say it right. "There goes my old man," Mrs. Delacroix said. She held her breath while her husband went forward. "Dunbar," Mrs. Summers said, and Mrs. Dunbar went steadily to the box while one of the women said, "Go on, Janie," and another said, "There she goes." Where next? Mrs. Graves said. She watched while Mr. Graves came around from the side of the box, greeted Mr. Summers gravely, and selected a slip from the paper from the box. By now, all through the crowd, there were men holding the small folded papers in their large hands. Turning them over and over nervously, Mrs. Dunbar and her two sons stood together. Mrs. Dunbar holding the slip of paper. Harbert! Hutchinson! Get up there, Bill, Mrs. Hutchinson said, and the people near her laughed. Jones! They do say, Mr. Adams said to the old man Warner who stood next to him, that over in the North Village, they're talking of giving up the lottery. Old man Warner snorted. Pack of crazy fools, he said. Listening to the young folks. Nothing's good enough for them. Next thing you know, they'll be wanting to go back to living in caves. Nobody work anymore. Live halfway for a while. Used to be a saying about lottery in June, corn be heavy soon. First thing you know, we'd all be eating stewed chickweeds and acorns. That'd always been a lottery, he added petulantly. Bad enough to see young Joe Summers up there joking with everybody. Some places have already quit lotteries, Mrs. Adams said. Nothing but trouble in that, old man Warner said, stoutly. Pack of young fools. Martin! And Bobby Martin watched his father go forward. Overdack! Percy! I wish they'd hurry, Mrs. Dunbar said to her older son. I wish they'd hurry. They're almost through, her son said. You get ready to run, tell Dad, Mrs. Dunbar said. Mr. Summers called his own name and then stepped forward precisely and selected a slip from the box. Then he called, Warner! 77th year I've been in the lottery, old man Warner said as he went through the crowd. 77th time. Watson, the tall boy came awkwardly through the crowd. Someone said, Don't be nervous, Jack, and Mr. Summers said, Take your time, son. Zanini. After that, there was a long pause. A breathless pause. Until Mr. Summers, holding a slip of papers in the air, said, All right, fellas. For a minute, no one moved. And then all the slips of paper were opened. Suddenly, all the women began to speak at once, saying, Who is it? Who's got it? Is it the Dunbars? Is it the Watsons? And the voices began to say, It's Hutchinson. It's Bill. Bill Hutchinson's got it. Go tell your father, Mrs. Dunbar said to her older son. People began to look around to see the Hutchinsons. Bill Hutchinson was standing quiet, staring down at the paper in his hand. Suddenly, Tessie Hutchinson shouted to Mr. Summers, You didn't give him enough time to take any paper he wanted. I saw you. It wasn't fair. Be a good sport, Tessie, Mrs. Delacroix called, and Mrs. Graves said, All of us took the same chance. Shut up, Tessie, Bill Hutchinson said. Well, everyone, Mr. Summers said, that was done pretty fast, and now we've got to be hurrying a little to get more done in time. He consulted his next list. Bill, he said, you draw for the Hutchinson family. You got any other households in the Hutchinsons? There's Dawn and Eva, Mrs. Hutchinson yelled. Make them take their chance. Daughters draw with their husbands' families, Tessie, Mr. Summers said gently. You know that as well as anyone else. It wasn't fair, Tessie said. I guess not, Joe, Bill Hutchinson said regretfully. My daughter draws with her husband's family. That's only fair. And I've got no other family except the kids. Then, as far as drawing for families is concerned, it's you, Mr. Summers said in explanation. And as far as drawing for households is concerned, that's you too, right? Right, Bill Hutchinson said. How many kids, Bill? Mr. Summers asked formally. 3, Bill Hutchinson said. There's Bill Jr. and Nancy and little Dave and Tessie and me. All right then, Mr. Summers said. Harry, you got the tickets back? Mr. Graves nodded and held up the slips of paper. Put them in the box then, Mr. Summers directed. Take Bill's and put it in. I think we ought to start over, Mrs. Hutchinson said, as quietly as she could. I tell you, it wasn't fair. You didn't give him enough time to choose. Everybody saw that. Mr. Graves had selected the 5 slips and put them in the box. And he dropped all the papers but those onto the ground where the breeze caught them and lifted them off. Listen, everybody, Mrs. Hutchinson was saying to the people around her. Ready, Bill? Mr. Summers asked, and Bill Hutchinson, with one quick glance around his wife and children, nodded. I'm just gonna I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. Remember, Mr. Summers said, take the slips and keep them folded until each person has taken one. Harry, you help little Dave. Mr. Graves took the hand of the little boy, who came willingly with him up to the box. Take a paper out of the box, Davy, Mr. Summers said. Davy put his hand in the box and laughed. Take just one paper, Mr. Summers said. Harry, you hold it for him. Mr. Graves took the child's hand and removed the folded paper from the tight fist and held it, while little Dave stood next to him and looked up at him wonderingly. Nancy next, Mr. Summers said. Nancy was 12, and her school friends breathed heavily as she went forward, switching her skirt, took a slip daintily from the box. Bill Jr., Mr. Summers said, and Billy, his face red and his feet overlarge, near knocked the box over as he got a paper out. Tessie, Mr. Summers said. She hesitated for a minute, looking around defiantly, and then set her lips and went up to the box. She snatched a paper out and held it behind her. Bill, Mr. Summers said, and Bill Hutchinson reached into the box and felt around, bringing his hand out at last with a slip of paper in it. The crowd was quiet. A girl whispered, "Oh, I hope it's not Nancy." And the sound of the whisper reached the edges of the crowd. It's not the way it used to be, Old Man Warner said clearly. People ain't the way they used to be. All right, Mr. Summers said. Open the papers. Harry, you open little Dave's. Mr. Graves opened the slip of paper, and there was a general sigh through the crowd as he held it up, and everyone could see that it was blank. Nancy and Bill Jr. opened theirs at the same time, and both beamed and laughed, turning around to the crowd and holding their slips of paper above their heads. Tessie, Mr. Summers said. There was a pause. And then Mr. Summers looked at Bill Hutchinson, and Bill unfolded his paper and showed it. It was blank. It's Tessie, Mr. Summers said, and his voice was hushed. Show us her paper, Bill. Bill Hutchinson went over to his wife and forced the slip of paper out of her hand. It had a black spot on it. The black spot Mr. Summers had made the night before with a heavy pencil in the coal company office. Bill Hutchinson held it up, and there was a stir in the crowd. All right, folks, Mr. Summers said. Let's finish quickly. Although the villagers had forgotten the ritual and lost the original black box, they still remembered to use stones. The pile of stones the boys had made earlier was ready. There were stones on the ground with the blowing scraps of paper that had come out of the box. Delacroix selected a stone so large that she had to pick it up with both her hands and turned to Mrs. Dunbar. Come on, she said. Hurry up. Mr. Dunbar had small stones in both hands, and she said, gasping for breath, I can't run at all. You have to go ahead and I'll catch up with you. The children had stones already, and someone gave little Davy Hutchinson a few pebbles. Tessie Hutchinson was in the center of a cleared space by now, and she held her hands out desperately as the villagers moved in on her. It isn't fair, she said. A stone hit her on the side of the head. Old Man Warner was saying, come on, everyone. Steve Adams was right in front of the crowd of villagers, with Mrs. Graves beside him. It isn't fair! It isn't right! Mrs. Hutchinson screamed, and they were upon her. Tessie's the winner! It's not a scary story, but, you know, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pebbles for the baby Hutchinson. I didn't remember the pebbles for baby Hutchinson. Good times. Good fucking times. Yeah, see, you can find like short film versions of it on YouTube and stuff, and people have done plays of this one. Pretty famous. Pretty famous. Not the scariest story, but boy, does it get dark. I know, it's when the turn happens, just like, ah, I see. It's pretty good. Oh, look at the time. 10:22. We still got so much time. I guess we still got time. And this is another cool story out there. Get your baby to stone you to death. Get your little baby. Alright, let's see. I'm gonna delete out some of these ones that I know I don't need anymore. Bop, bop, bop. Ooh, we read 3 stories tonight. That's fantastic. Man, do we even have enough time to read all these? I don't even know anymore. I don't even know anymore, you know? That story's long. Alright, well, I guess, like, it's only 10:30. And I only really had one more story planned for today, not counting I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream. But that's, I don't know if I'm gonna have time for that and this one. This is an important one. This is a very important story. We gotta read this one. So let's say 10:23. Like, how long is this? My life. Thank you, Joyce. Alright. Let's go with this one. Also, I'm just gonna make a really quick plug to my friendo. Let me just see what this is called here. Search. I just need to remember some things really quickly. Rebecca? Where's my friend Rebecca? Yeah. So, this particular, I'm just gonna... So this book, I should get to it. Okay, this story I'm about to read, this following story. Once upon a time, I used to write for a website. It still exists, but I basically don't do anything for it anymore. It was called theotaku.com. It was a website, just anime fandom. People did a lot of fan art. They made a lot of like wallpapers. They made quizzes and shit like that. You could do a lot of blogging. And I did a lot of writing for this site. Like I ran their weekly polls. I did their weekly caption battle shit. The site still exists. The community still exists. A lot of people I know all over the world are because of this website. And at some point, we were just like, all right, well, we got this new version of the website out, and we're going to try to make it really accessible to people who want to write shit. And at some point, a friend of mine, Rebecca, she and I were like, you know, we like to write. We like to tell stories. We're going to make a little, like, they called them worlds, like basically a blog about writing. So every week we had our schedule. Like, she would do like a little writing workshop. I would do a writing workshop. We would get a guest writing workshop at some point that week. And then at the end of the week, she would post her, what were they called? Becky's Writers Blockbusters. And basically it was just prompts. Just like, you know, one sentence prompts to encourage you to start writing. So this particular week, back in 2008, this story is 12 years old. 12 damn years old. And it was all done that way. We're still listening to this music. We did this I wrote the story based on the fact that week she did... Okay, this is too weird. Let's go back to unsettling music for a second. Or we'll start that in a second. What's that? That's too scary. Where's that piano one? Unsettling music. 1 hour of dark piano. Dark piano? How dark is this piano? That's a Pizza Hut ad. So it was October, so she did like a little write-up workshop about how to write horror stories. Is this Doki? It was Doki Doki music. So the prompt, so her workshop was basically how to write a scary story. You know, just certain things like, you know, don't reveal everything you have. Encourage, yeah. You know, show, don't tell. Imply things. Let the people have to use their imaginations on what happened. So I was like, okay, this week I'm gonna write a scary story. Also, it's October, so I had to do it. And then her prompts came up, and you know, it's like, you know, talk about something from your past, or talk about this or that, or think about a time that you felt really like scared or something like that. So I went with her prompt, which was write about a used bookstore. And in one night, I posted it, and it was pretty good. Lotto day. Gotta have super happy fun times music. Yep. So anyways, why am I bringing up my friend Rebecca? Well, she is now officially a published author. And that's fucking cool. So I'm gonna just I'm just gonna just drop that in the chat a little bit there. This is a book I already have it pre-ordered. The Valley and the Flood. Bit of a fantasy, bit of a split worlds. Might be a little bit isekai, but she made it. She is a published author. So, you know, Miss Mahoney, fucking all the props to you, cause you making more bank than me now. Anyways, so for oh god, how does the line go? It's like for your listening pleasure, I give you from 2008, The Used Bookstore by James Leung. Make that letter better. Urban adventurers. That's what they call people like ourselves. Tammy, Jean, and I had learned a few things from a couple websites, decked ourselves out with black everything, cameras, and went off into all the nooks and crannies of the city. Oh shit. Pause. Let us fix that. Thank you, Lancer, for reminding me. This is no longer The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. This is the used bookstore from 2008. A contemporary writer by the name of James Leung. You don't fit anymore. Pew. I need to make the crest, the shield smaller. It's fine. It's fine. Where were we? Urban adventurers. That's what they call people like ourselves. Tammy, Jean, and I had learned a few things from a couple websites, decked ourselves out with black everything, cameras, and went off into all the nooks and crannies of the city. As exciting as it must be to venture deep into South American jungles or Egyptian tombs, we knew there was just as much undiscovered mystery in our own town. Our last venture into the Aldergrove Psychiatric Hospital last month was taxing enough on us. Jean had slipped and cut his arm really bad on I don't even know what. And the security guards had gotten a little too close for comfort. Still, we got some amazing photos, and we're excited to show off this little forgotten part of the city on our website. We certainly earned it. But we didn't want to do anything large-scale like that for a while. We wanted what Jean called it, a vacation outing. Tammy suggested the old used bookstore on Royal Avenue. Jean and I were in full agreement. It was close by, lightly guarded, and had plenty of stories in and of itself. Tammy was retelling most of them as we drove to the bookstore that night. The madness of 23-year-old James, basically. The bookstore is actually in the building basement, she said from the backseat. It's underneath the community center, which no one uses, I said. It's mostly just wasted space that the city doesn't know what to do with, right? Right, Tammy said. So in general, this should be pretty straightforward. Tammy spread a sly grin across her face. Then we can take some pictures of ghosts and dead things and all that other fun stuff. Oh yeah, I said, smiling and shaking my head slowly for our group's founder. Dare to dream. Pulling into the alley behind the row of buildings, we quietly tied bandanas around our faces. Whoa, shit. And stepped out into the fairly cool summer air, making our way towards the desolate community center. Tammy and I had scouted the building out last week and already had an entry point into the building. We were all inside within the next 2 minutes. The community center was just as we expected it to be. Dusty rooms filled with stacks of boxes connected to smaller dusty rooms filled with stacks of boxes. Tammy was already snapping pictures of all the rooms while Jean and I looked for stairs that would lead to the bookstore beneath. Ha! We failed already, Jean said with a laugh, shining his flashlight at our footprints in the dust behind us. The ghosts, they will know we have come. Even though his bandana covered his face, the wrinkling around his eyes more than gave off how amused he seemed by our inability to walk on air. Well, we're lucky, I said, and the dust ghosts will cover that back up for us after we leave. Considering how undisturbed the building already was, it seemed more than likely it would remain as such once we were gone. In any case, Jean took a picture of our footprints for posterity before we continued down the hallway. Jean and I found the stairs soon enough. It was long, more than 20 steps, and without a railing on either side. A smashed light bulb sat in the socket above us while the broken pieces lay covered in dust below. Jean took more pictures of the broken light as I slowly made my way down the walled stairs. I was immediately regretting wearing the shirt I had as the stale air seemed to get warmer the further down I went. I knew I had to have long sleeves to protect my bare arms should I need it. But I also had a much thinner black shirt that I ignored for the ridiculous fact that it was faded and not as black as the shirt I was currently wearing. To add insult to injury, all kinds of junk pooled at the bottom of the steps. Dust, dead bugs, pigeon droppings. How pigeons made their way in, I'll never know. All of it resided at the bottom of the stairs in front of the bookstore door. My bandana was sticking to my face now as my slow, audible breaths passed through the light cloth. Another camera flash blazed a white outline around me as I turned around to look up the stairs. Jean waved again before taking another picture, blinding me for a few seconds. I gave him the finger in return as we both snickered quietly to ourselves. Tammy caught up to us, finally content with her self-led tour around the community center. "You found it?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Now someone come down here and give me some light so I can do this?" The door into the bookstore itself was nothing special, just a wooden door with a used books placard screwed into the front. A padlock set on a hinged latch proved to be the only true obstacle in our way. Tammy slung her camera and met me in the stuffy stairwell, flashlight out where I needed it. I pulled my Leatherman off my belt and, with a screwdriver head out, began to take the padlock latch off from the wall side. As the first screw came loose, I heard Jean shudder dramatically. Over-dramatically, perhaps, before he glided his way down the stairs to meet with us. "What the hell was that about?" Tammy asked him. "I don't know," Jean said. It just got a weird chill. Didn't want to stand alone at the top of the stairs anymore. I don't know." "Aw," I said as I worked on the third screw. "You got scared and jumped into the dusty crap hole with us. That was sweet of you." Tammy snickered. "Nate, don't be a dick," Jean replied. I ignored his request, instead focusing on the final screw in the latch, which came out without a hitch. Letting the 4 screws sit in the recesses of the now free-swinging latch, I reholstered my Leatherman and took out a small piece of shaped card, sliding that between the doorknob and the doorframe. About a minute later, the door was open. With a slow breath, I started pulling the door open. For such an old door, I was amazed at how quietly it opened. Neither creak nor squeak to be heard. Jean chose that moment to sneeze, blasting a sudden explosion of sound behind us. Though Tammy and I didn't cry out, we both took in sharp breaths and felt our rates rise to unnatural heights for all of 2 seconds. We both punched Jean in the shoulders. "Didn't need that. Did not need that," Tammy growled as all 3 of us tried to hold in the oncoming snickers. "Don't blame me," Jean said. "I can't exactly help the fact that it's dusty as all hell down here." Leatherman Squirt Multi-Tool is my absolute favorite tool. "I can't exactly help the fact that it's all dusty as hell down here." I just continued to hold in my laughter. As Tammy vainly tried to shush us, I bit down on the insides of my mouth and entered the store, the old store. I need a drink. The old downstairs used bookstore somehow was even warmer and stuffier than the stairwell, as though the air had been still for years before our imposition. Nevertheless, our efforts had paid off. We were in the bookstore. "Oh, wow," Tammy said quietly as she took out her camera and made her way deeper into the small bookstore, cutting a line through the thick dust on the floor as she did so. While most of the books, save a few odd strewn about pieces, were gone, the 5 shoulder-height, double-sided bookshelves remained stamped in rows across the store. Along the inner walls, larger shelves reaching to the low ceiling surrounded them. A simple desk next to the door we came through seemed to act as an all-purpose sales counter with drilled holes in the surface for where a cash register must have been. Beyond that, the room was bare with only a couple high-set windows along the tops of the outer wall, feasibly able to allow some light in were it daytime and were they not boarded up. Jean brushed past me softly, entering the bookstore. Concerned about the door, I took a large torn book from the area and set against the door frame to keep the door open. As easy as it was to open the door, we knew better than to take our chances of getting ourselves locked into these kinds of places. Tammy and Jean's cameras flashed constantly, taking pictures of every possible little thing. The pile of books labeled "damaged" in the corner, the line of dust bunnies colonizing the lower shelves, the high boarded up windows. All were fair game for the 3 of us as we explored every inch of the store. "Hey, Nate," Jean said to me while I was crouched beneath the desk. I turned to face him. "What is..." I didn't have a chance to speak before he clapped a large book shut in my face, erupting a massive cloud of dust around my head. The dust in my eyes, along with the sudden noise, was enough to make me lose my balance. I fell hard backwards onto the dusty tiled floor, coughing and sneezing while Jean snickered. See? You can't help it either, can you? He said to me, again with a wide smile I could only imagine beneath his makeshift mask. I could see Tammy running over to us as I sat up, the gray dust pronounced on my black pants and shirt. She too was trying her best to hold in her laughter while at the same time telling us to shut up. Again, the apparent giggles began brewing within us while I buried my face in my one clean arm, to smother the noise from my never-ending barrage of sneezes. 4 more times in rapid succession, I blasted sneeze after sneeze into the inside of my elbow, while Tammy slapped what dust she could off my back and shoulders. As my sneezing eased up, something against the desk caught my eye, like some kind of dark patch on the side of the wood paneling. With my other hand, I fumbled along the floor and picked up my dropped flashlight. Hey, check this out, I said to the others as I shined my beam on the spot of interest. Oh, no way, Tammy said first, incredulously. That's not blood, is it? I scared myself. Taking into consideration how much activity had just transpired, I was not surprised in the least by how sickeningly hot the bookstore felt to me. That, however, did not make it any less unbearable. Maybe it's ink or something, Jean suggested as he took a picture of the dried blot in question. And even if it is blood, would it be that surprising? Jean pointed to his arm and shrugged. He did have a point. So, hey, while on the subject of blood, I said to everyone, what kind of fun ghost stories does this place actually have again? Jean laughed a little before offering a hand to help me up. I ignored him and got up by myself. Actually, Tammy said, there really aren't any actual stories about this place. Like, none that I know of, anyway. I continued dusting myself off with my hands as she spoke. Why? You think the blood means once upon a time ago that... Tammy was interrupted by her own mousy little sneeze. Shining my flashlight through the dark air, I could now see dust swirling everywhere, illuminating our flashlight beams like white pylons. Even though our bandanas were primarily for hiding our identities, should any guards or police officers see us, I could only imagine that everyone else was just as glad to have them to block all the dust everywhere as I was. Considering all the little circles the dust made in our light, it's hard to say that it was still stagnant air we were breathing. What it had become was not much better, though. Just as Tammy finished her sneezing, I felt my own strange chill pass behind me. I went back to slapping the dust off my arms and legs, kicking up even more swirling specks, but at this point I didn't care. I was sick of the dust, sick of breathing it, sick of being covered in it. It was strange. In past outings, I had fallen down a hill through wet mud. When we explored an old factory, I was covered in grease and cobwebs, and I was still ready for more. When we got into the old brewery, I even fell into a puddle of unknown liquid, remaining wet and bald the rest of the night. But even then, I was still quite happy to continue our exploration. Not this time. I hadn't given up like this in a couple of years, but tonight I had had enough. That's it, I said, coughing once again. I raised my bandana just high enough so I could spit out against the wall. I'm done. Let's get the hell out of here. Nate, Tammy said before I cut her off. Do we have pictures? Enough pictures? Tammy shrugged. Yeah, I'm probably fine with what I have. Jean? Sure, Jean said, stepping up and leaning over the top of one of the bookshelves. I'm good. Thank you, I said, before unceremoniously stomping back towards the door. As if my calm wasn't ruined enough, I then found the book I had propped to keep the door open, splayed open on the ground. The door had shut on itself. I sighed audibly and turned to my friends. Okay, which of you assholes moved the book? I said sternly. Jean took immediate offense. Alright, Nate, first, chill, he said. I didn't touch your damn book. I turned to Tammy, whose wide and innocent eyes met my gaze. Nate, she said, I've been on this side of the store this entire time. I rolled my eyes, swore under my breath, and reached for the doorknob. The door wouldn't open. The knob turned, the door latch pulled open, and the door would give in ever so slightly, but the padlock latch on the outside of the door seemed as secure as when we had first arrived. Dude, what's going on? Why aren't you opening the door? Gene asked as he made his way over. I'm trying, I said. I can't. Well, why not? I can't, okay? Slammed my fist against the door once. It's locked from the outside again. What? How? Tammy said as she ran over. How the hell should I know? I pushed myself away from the door, walking a slow circle as I felt both. Pushed myself away from the door, walking a slow circle as I felt both hot, sticky air and cold sweat down my back and on my face. While I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly, I could hear Gene trying his best to muscle the door open. Like me, he had no luck. Oh yeah, this is great, Gene muttered as he kept slamming his shoulder into the immobile door. Tammy told Gene not to tire himself out, and he moved aside so he could see the door for herself. I instead picked up the book that mysteriously decided to come out of its place on its own. I'm not sure if it was just incredibly irony or some cosmic joke, but the open page in the book proudly displayed a picture of the Tower of London. Closing the book, a large tome about public execution and other related items are hurled into the back corner of the store, knocking over stacks of damaged books with a long avalanche of noise. Gene and I both turned our focus to the door, tucking aside our flashlights in between our belts and our pockets. Together, we slammed the door in unison for the better part of a minute. Our shoulders began aching and our progress remained static. We're uncomfortably perked up again by a combination of something smashing against the wall next to us and Tammy's shriek in response to the sudden noise. Okay, what the fuck was that? She said, pointing at whatever was now crumpled up against the base of the wall. Taking another slow, but anything but calm, breath, I pulled my flashlight out from between my belt and lit the object in question. It was a small book. It was as if someone had thrown it at us. The book was not the only thing I saw either. I was the only one on the ground, right? I asked my friends. They nodded in the positive. Okay, then whose handprints are those on the floor? We all came around to look at the cleared spots in the dust. I was wrong, though. They weren't handprints. They were footprints. Small, barefooted footprints. My bandana was soaked with the moisture from my breath, and the sweat was coming down my brow. At this point, I was imagining the dust collecting on my mask, dampening and building a sticky gray cement that dared cut off my breathing altogether. Jean retched a little and mentioned feeling faint. Tammy remained as silent as she could, slowly making her way back up to the door. For me, 1,000 questions flew through my mind as I slowly traced the direction of the footprints with my flashlight. The footprints led, not surprisingly at this point, between the bookshelves and turned towards the damaged books corner. I may have had 1,000 questions, but I knew where I'd find the answer for at least one. Nate, come back, please, Tammy pleaded as I slowly started walking back deeper into the bookstore. I was still on the verge of choking as the store grew warmer still. With my flashlight in my outstretched left hand, I reached for my Leatherman with my right. Again, the absurdity of our situation never left my thoughts. The urban adventurers had their rules. No souvenirs, only photographs. No vandalism. Above all, however, was no fighting with law enforcement or security should the situation arise. That last bit lingered in my head as I gripped my Leatherman tightly and passed between the shelves. There was no way that there was going to be a night watchman around that next corner, but still. I felt sick. Nate! Both Gene and Tammy screamed at me, shocking me upright and choking me on my own thick spit. What? I said hoarsely. The doors, Gene said. It's open! You didn't need to tell me twice. I turned around and dashed towards the open door in the dirty stairwell. Tammy and Gene were already up the stairs as I flew out the doorway. We didn't have the flashlights to prove it, but I could tell that another huge cloud of dust was probably billowing out in my wake. I slipped on what must have been dried pigeon droppings falling against the stairs and barely breaking my fall with my forearms. While on the stairs with Tammy and Gene shouting for me to get up, I looked at my hands in front of my face, at my flashlight and my Leatherman. Cursing to myself one last time, I pushed myself back up and turned around. Despite the whispered yet urgent protests of the two at the top of the stairs, I slammed the door shut again, bracing it with my body while I jammed my flashlight back into my belt and fumbled for the screwdriver attachment on my Leatherman. Light! Someone! I called up. Immediately I had two distant beams shining on my back from the top of the stairs. Couldn't blame them for not wanting to come back down. The shaky haphazard light behind me, I tried to keep as calm ahead as I could while I screwed the padlock latch back into the stucco wall, giving each one an extra little twist to ensure that nothing would pop them back out anytime soon. The very moment the final screw was back as it was before we'd arrived, we all hurried out of the community center and back to the car. Whether only I heard the voice saying, "Get out," or not, I'll never know, as I'd never bothered to ask Tammy or Jean about it. All I can remember from the rest of the night was that we all spoke very little in the car, and none of us wanted to go back home by ourselves. Shadows. That night, we all went to Jean's house. We changed into the spare clothes we all had in the car, and sat together on the couch watching television infomercials until the sun came up. I sneezed as Jean and Tammy started to fall asleep. They thanked me. The fact that that story still kind of gets me when I read it is pretty good. It's pretty good. Makes me happy. I'm very happy about that. So that's your boy's writing from 12 years ago. Did I get any better? I don't know. I hope so. I haven't really been writing too much lately. But that's what it be. That's what it be. That's a good one. I like it. It's funny actually. When I originally wrote the story, I remember it was like Thanksgiving, right around that time, in October, and my whole family had gone for dinner at like my sister-in-law's parents' house in Langley, and I just remember I didn't go out, one because like I knew I was kind of busy in general, but also I really wanted to finish the story. I was like in deep. And I remember some point in the middle when I was writing it, the phone rang and it like scared the shit out of me. I just remember that bit, and then posted it on Thing, and everyone seemed to really enjoy it. I remember I had one friend who was just like, I'm more intrigued less by the ghost story and more of the idea of just going out in the middle of the night, like going through like empty abandoned buildings and stuff. First thought when the Tiny Feet was mentioned, your bookstore got gremlins. Yeah. I was thinking about looking for the gremlin sound effects for notifications actually. Colston, go back and open the door. Colston, go open the door for them. Colston, unlock the bookstore. Oh, Colston. We love Colston. I now realize I should probably leave the live chat as a not disappearing chat. I should be able to do that at some point. I'll do it next time. So I think that's about most of what we have written so far. Oh shit, I never finished a thing that I was around. So I'm working on another story right now. It's for next week. I'd say I'm halfway, third of the way through it right now. So reasonably, my next day that I sit down for realsies to work on it, I can probably get in pretty good. Let me look at this. I guess I just have it open in front of me. Let me just see what I can do here. Let's return. Just give me 1 second. I realized I was writing a little bit today, and I didn't finish the point I wanted to get to. Okay. So if you guys are so inclined, I could give you a little sneak peek of next week's story. The more I'm writing it, the more I'm realizing this is going to be a chonker, and I think it'll be pretty good. I might have a problem that it's I'm letting it go too long, and I'm not getting to the meat of the story fast enough, which is a very fair criticism, I suspect. But I don't know. I kind of like the slow burn a little bit too. It could be wrong of me to think so, but That's what we're working on. So we're gonna have that for next week. Along with that, like what else do we have? Do we have planned for next week? Without giving away too much, what do we got? We got a very famous Canadian poem about dudes during the gold rush. We got a real famous story by Neil Gaiman, a retelling of Snow White that's like ultra hyper fucked up. I might actually need content warnings on that one. It's good though. It's super fucked up. And then we got the story that I'm writing right now. All I will say, a good chonker. Yeah, this should be pretty good. So, you know, we'll read this one last. And we'll see how far we can go with that. But yeah, so let's see. I'll read about where I am in the middle. It should be enough to get y'all excited. Let's see. That's a good start. So all I can say is the story we are going to tell next week, the story that I'm currently writing, is called Cassandra. And it's about a young girl visiting her grandpa after not seeing him for a while, both just to spend time with him and to hear some stories and you know, just to hang out with him because he's been lonely. Grandma died a year ago and stuff like that. And I think this will be fun. I had the premise in my head when I was driving home from work one day. And I'll probably talk about it a bit more next week. But if you want a little bit of a preview, let me jump into this last little bit. It's about like a page worth of stuff. This will be fun. No, that's too much. Okay, this is where we're gonna cut in. So I mean, so girl visiting grandpa, first time in a little while, and things getting a little curious, we'll say. There's gonna be a lot of no context to this, and it's gonna be funny, but hopefully this is enough for teasers. So, an excerpt from Cassandra, a 2020 short story by James Lang. The photos on the walls rumbled as I slammed the bedroom door shut behind me and braced my back against it. What the hell did I just see? I clearly, at least I thought I saw something because my goddamn pulse was throbbing. And I just cleared 2 floors of a house in about 30 seconds. My phone was in my hands as soon as my butt hit the floor and immediately dropped as I tried to open about 4 different apps at the same time. Who was I going to message? Who could I tell? What could I even tell them? Well, either I spent more time thinking about my next 7 steps than I thought, or Grandpa got way more spry in the past minute. But he was knocking softly on the door and calling for me sooner than I was expecting, in any case. Cassie, he said, are you okay? Grandpa, I feel like I could ask you the same thing, I said. Oh, don't worry about me, he said. I'm not the one who just walked in on a naked 80-year-old man who just blew chunks all over his bedroom. I'm still sorry about that. I feel like I just saw something really weird. You did. A naked 80-year-old man throwing up. No, I mean more than that. Hey, don't underestimate how traumatizing seeing a naked 80-year-old man can be, Grandpa said, not missing a beat. How long was I staring at Super Nintendo screens just now? I mean, there's definitely a sleepy aura going around in this house, and it's fair to presume that maybe I'm not exactly super alert right now. My brain raced over my memory of the morning to explain my imagination. I woke up a lot earlier than usual. There's no coffee in this house. Okay, maybe I didn't see what I thought I saw. Also, Grandpa isn't really giving me a lot of impression that anything especially weird happened. The other half of my brain kept prodding me, reminding me of how much subjective terminology I was running through my thoughts. Well, that half of the brain was not being helpful, so the reptilian part of my brain went straight to the source. The most likely explanation is probably the correct one. So are you feeling better at least? I asked through the door. I'll feel better once I clean up the puke, he said. But yeah, a little better. The rest of the day went by really fast. We didn't go anywhere. I mostly stayed upstairs working on my readings while Grandpa stayed downstairs cleaning his carpet and, I guess, napping like usual. I didn't post anywhere online about what I thought I saw. I didn't want to be that person. No, I spent a good chunk of my wandering afternoon mind telling myself that I freaked out about something stupid and imaginary. You know, like what a normal, mentally healthy person does. I ordered us some basic bitch roast chicken and potatoes type dinner. Reasonably as plain enough for Grandpa to have a good time with it. As we ripped into our dinner, I noticed Grandpa was especially attentive to, well, basically everything I was doing. It was like he was watching where my hands went, or where my eyes were looking. If it were anyone else, I'd have probably found it more uncomfortable. But he was my grandpa. Yes, he was my grandpa. And actually, as I thought about it, I realized something. I had his complete attention right now. Mom always mentioned some story of you swimming across Lake Okanagan with Grandma, I said. When I was 6, I always figured you were looking for Ogopogo. I don't think I ever properly heard the details of that one. Grandpa laughed a little. Well, I mean, who wouldn't at least try to find a little bit of Ogopogo while you're in that lake, right? He said. And finally, here we were. Grandpa was finally telling me the old family stories that were otherwise going to disappear with him if that day came. His eyes were wide and alert, and he was in a good mood to tell some stories. So what else did your mom say? So what else did your mom say about that day? He asked me. I just want to know where she left off. Oh, I did not close the quotation on that. Okay, I said. You were in the lake. You swam across it. Something about a fish that ended up in Grandma's swimsuit. Grandpa laughed extra hard at that bit. Okay, so this was the lake incident from before your mom was born, right? Yeah, that's right. That's why she could never really tell me the whole story. Okay. Yeah, there's a reason why your grandma Beth and I told the story to your mom. It was perhaps the first time this trip I was not upset that Grandpa Jackson barely touched his food. Pretty much the rest of the night was him telling the amazing adventures of Jackson Beth in the 1960s. Whether it was the first time watching a movie in a drive-in theater, or the first time ethnic food made its way into town. There's lots of great stories about Jackson Beth. And I loved hearing stories about them. Just one thing, though. Grandpa always called Grandma Liz. So I think this is going to be fun. I'm excited for that son of a bitch. Ethnic food. The story takes place in Kamloops. Seemed like the right thing to do. Fucking Kamloops. This is gonna be great. Yeah, so I need to focus and get my ass on that and make sure that story's finished. Otherwise, we gonna have a problem next week, and I don't want to have a problem next week. So yeah, that's gonna be Fridays for the rest of Spooktober. Grandpa is possessed. So we will do that when we get there. So other than that, it's 11 o'clock. So not the latest. Grandpa is replaced. Grandpa's got turned. You know what? How busy are you guys? Do you guys need to go to bed right now, or do you guys have time for one more? Grandpa, go and eat Cassie. If you guys have like 40-50 minutes to spare, I will do that one. I am intrigued. You better be. Do I have the energy? Actually, hold on. What time do I have to work tomorrow? What time do I have to work on my... Do I have to get to work at like 7 a.m. tomorrow? Is it 7 a.m. tomorrow? 7 a.m. tomorrow. Alright, we will leave Harlan Ellison out of today. Maybe if we start early enough next week. It's only 1 a.m. here. Week-long cliffhanger it is. Well, I still have to write the rest of that story. Ah, fuck. Do I dare? Do I dare? A long fucking... You know what? There's a lot of paragraphs in this one. So it's secretly not as much text as it feels like. I mean, it's still like 13 pages, but... Fuck it, let's do it. All right, guys, we're gonna do it. We're gonna go Harlan Ellison. I have no mouth and I must scream. Very famous sci-fi speculative thingy. I'm just gonna quickly go to the bathroom and let's do one more. So let's do the BRB. I'll be right back. Also, that Halloween theme is fucking amazing. Actually, can I adjust the settings on this fucker? Stream. Settings. Appearance. Show beer counter. Compact mode. That's not what I need. Yeah. I had to change the settings so that it doesn't disappear faster, but I don't know if I don't know if I can. I don't. You should play the adventure game sometime. You know what? Is it on Steam actually? Is it on Steam? Steam, come here for a second. I feel like I would feel bad because I would fuck it up. Oh shit, I have no mouth and I must scream. $6.49. That's not a bad price for an ancient game from 1996. Ooh, that would be fun. Gotta make sure to refresh the cache in OBS. Okay, I don't know if I know how to do that. Do I know how to do that? Restream chat. Shut down source when not visible? No, do not shut down the source. Oh, no. Control audio via OBS. I mean, there's no winning, really. This is fair, too. This is not that kind of game. Refresh cache your current page. Ah! Okay. Alright, if it goes, it goes. If not, I'll try to figure it out next week. Anyways, if for those of you who have never heard of this, Harlan Ellison made this story, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, based on, apparently, if I understand the story correctly, he saw a doll with no mouth, and that's how he captioned it, is that I have no mouth and I must scream. This one is pretty wild. Let's get a different song. What's the right kind of music for I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream? No, go back, YouTube. Places you've seen in your nightmares. That's not music. Dark ambience, horror background music, 10 hours. Megalophobia images with unsettling. No.
How fast does Dove Dry Spray actually dry?
I don't care, Dove Dry Spray. But yeah, very pretty famous story. Harlan Ellison, I Have No Mouth. When did this story come out? When did this come? He wrote this story once upon a time in 1967. Won a Hugo Award in 1968. And it's kind of wild. Oh, that's ambient. Alright, this is the one. Let's get into it. The sooner I'm done, the sooner I can go to sleep and have nightmares. Also, I got really warm, so I had to take off my sweater. I look like a chump now. I need bigger text. There we go. Limp. The butt. Keyboard. Put that microphone in front of me. Yeah. Limp. The body of Gorster hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging high. Oh, hold on. Feared of existential brought about by the world wars. Everyone foreseeing dystopian futures brought about by massive war. That makes sense. Amazing story. Masterwork. Well, let's hope I don't fuck it up then, hey? I'm really close to the mic now. Let's turn the gain down ever so slightly. Okay. Limp, the body of Gorster, hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging high above us in the computer chamber, and it did not shiver in the chill, oily breeze that blew internally through the main cavern. The body hung head down, attached to the underside of the pallet by the sole of its right foot. It had been drained of blood through a precise incision made from ear to ear under the lantern jaw. There was no blood on the reflective surface of the metal floor. When Gorster joined our group and looked up at himself, it was already too late for us to realize that, once again, Am had duped us. Had its fun. It had been a diversion in the part of the machine. 3 of us had vomited, turning away from one another in a reflex as ancient as the nausea that had produced it. Gorster went white. It was almost as though he had seen a voodoo icon and was afraid of the future. Oh God, he mumbled and walked away. The 3 of us followed him after a time and found him sitting with his back to one of the smaller chittering banks, his head in his hands. Ellen knelt down beside him and stroked his hair. He didn't move, but his voice came out of his covered face quite clearly. Why doesn't it just do us in and get it over with? Christ, I don't know how much longer I can go on like this. It was our 109th year in the computer. He was speaking for all of us. Nimdok, which was the name the machine had forced him to use because Am amused itself with strange sounds, was hallucinating that there were canned goods in the ice caverns. Gorser and I were very dubious. It's another shuck, I told him, like the goddamn frozen elephant Am sold us. Benny almost went out of his mind over that one. We'll hike all the way and it'll be putrefied or some damn thing. I say forget it. Stay here. It'll have to come up with something pretty soon or we'll die. Benny shrugged. 3 days it had been since we'd last eaten. Worms. Thick. Ropey. Nimdok was no more certain. He knew that there was a chance, but he was getting thin. It couldn't be any worse than here. Colder, but that didn't matter much. Hot, cold, hail, lava, boils or locusts. It never mattered. The machine masturbated and we had to take it or die. Ellen decided us. I've got to have something, Ted. Maybe there'll be some Bartlett pears or peaches. Please, Ted. Let's try it. I gave in easily. What the hell? Mattered not at all. Ellen was grateful, though. She took me twice out of turn. Even that had ceased to matter. And she never came, so why bother? But the machine giggled every time we did it. Loud, up there, back there, all around us, he snickered. It snickered. Most of the time I thought of Am as it, without a soul. But the rest of the time I thought of it as a him, in the masculine, the paternal, the patriarchal. For he is a jealous people. Him. It. God as Daddy the Deranged. We left on a Thursday. The machine always kept us up to date on the date. The passage of time was important. Not to us, sure as hell. But to him, it. Am. Thursday. Thanks. Nimdok and Gorster carried Ellen for a while, their hands locked to their own and each other's wrists. A seat. Benny and I walked before and after, just to make sure that, if anything happened, it would catch one of us, and at least Ellen would be safe. Fat chance. Safe. Didn't matter. It was only 100 miles or so to the ice caverns, and the second day, when we were lying out under the blistering sun he had materialized, he sent down some manna. Tasted like boiled boar urine. We ate it. On the third day, we passed through the Valley of Obsolescence, filled with rusting carcasses of ancient computer banks. Am had been as ruthless with his own life as with ours. It was a mark of his personality. It strove for perfection. Whether it was a matter of killing off unproductive elements in its own world-filling bulk, or perfecting methods for torturing us, Am was as thorough as those who had invented him, now long since gone to dust, could ever have hoped. But there was light filtering down from above, and we realized we must be very near the surface. But we didn't try to crawl up to see. There was virtually nothing out there. There'd been nothing that could be considered anything for over 100 years. Only the blasted skin of what had once been the home of billions. Now there were only 5 of us, down here, inside, alone with Am. I heard Ellen saying frantically, "No, Benny, don't! Come on, Benny, don't, please!" And then I realized I'd been hearing Benny murmuring under his breath for several minutes. He was saying, "I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna get out," over and over. His monkey-like face was crumpled up in an expression of beatific delight and sadness, all at the same time. The radiation scars Am had given him during the festival were drawn down into a mass of pink-white puckerings, and his features seemed to work independently of one another. Perhaps Benny was the luckiest of the 5 of us. He had gone stark, staring mad many years before. But even though we could call Am any damn thing we liked, we could think of the foulest thoughts of fused memory banks and corroded base plates, of burnt-out circuits and shattered control bubbles. The machine would not tolerate our trying to escape. Benny leapt away from me as I made a grab for him. He scrambled up the face of a smaller memory cube, tilted on its side and filled with rotted components. He squatted there for a moment, looking like the chimpanzee Am had intended him to resemble. Then he leapt high, caught a trailing beam of pitted and corroded metal, and went up it, hand over hand like an animal, till he was on a girdered ledge 20 feet above us. "Oh, Ted, Nimdoc, please, help him, get him down before—" She cut off. Tears began to stand in her eyes. She moved her hands aimlessly. It was too late. None of us wanted to be near him when whatever was going to happen, happened. And besides, we all saw through her concern. When Am had altered Benny during the machine's utterly irrational, hysterical phase, it was not merely Benny's face the computer had made like a giant ape's. He was big in the privates. She loved that. She serviced us, as a matter of course, but she loved it from him. Oh, Ellen. Pedestal Ellen. Pristine, pure Ellen. Oh, Ellen the clean. Scum filth. Gorster slapped her. She slumped down, staring up at poor loony Benny, and she cried. It was her big defense, crying. We'd gotten used to it 75 years earlier. Gorster kicked her in the side. This story needs content warnings. Short version, it's fucked up. Be prepared for fucked up stuff. Violence. Much violence. Then the sound began. It was light, that sound. Half sound and half light. Something that began to glow from Benny's eyes, and pulse within growing loudness. Dim sonorities that grew more gigantic and brighter as the light sound increased in tempo. It must have been painful, and the pain must have been increasing with the boldness of the light, the rising volume of the sound, for Benny began to mewl like a wounded animal. At first softly, when the light was dim and the sound was muted, then louder as his shoulders hunched together. His back humped, as though he was trying to get away from it. His hands folded across his chest like a chipmunk's. His head tilted to the side. The sad little monkey face pinched in anguish. Then he began to howl, as the sound coming from his eyes grew louder. Louder and louder. I slapped the sides of my head with my hands, but I couldn't shut it out. It cut through easily. The pain shivered through my flesh like tinfoil on a tooth. And Benny was suddenly pulled erect. On the girder he stood up, jerked to his feet like a puppet. The light was now pulsing out of his eyes in 2 great round beams. The sound crawled up in some incomprehensible scale, and then he fell forward, straight down, hit the plate steel floor with a crash. He lay there, jerking spastically as the light flowed around him, and the sound spiraled up out of normal range. Then the light beat its way back inside his head. The sound spiraled down, and he was left there, lying there, crying piteously. His eyes were 2 soft, moist pools of pus-like jelly. Am had blinded him. Gorster and Nimdoc and myself, we turned away. But not before we caught a look of relief on Ellen's warm, concerned face. Sea green lights suffused the cavern where we made camp. Am provided punk and we burned it, sitting huddled around the warm and pathetic fire, telling stories to keep Benny from crying in his permanent night. "What does Am mean?" Gorster answered him. We had done this sequence 1,000 times before, but it was Benny's favorite story. At first, it meant the Allied Master Computer, and then it meant Adaptive Manipulator, and later on it developed sentience and linked itself up, and they called it Aggressive Manus. But then it was too late, and finally they called it Self, Am, Emerging Intelligence, and what I meant was I am cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Benny drooled a little and snickered. There was the Chinese Am, and the Russian Am, and the Yankee Am, and he stopped. Benny was the beating on the floor plates with a large, hard fist. He was not happy. Gorster had not started at the beginning. Gorster began again. The Cold War started and became World War III and just kept going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. They sank the first shafts and began building Am. There was the Chinese Am, and the Russian Am, and the Yankee Am, and everything was fine until they had honeycombed the entire planet, adding on this element and that element. But one day... Paul! Hello! We're about a quarter of the way through... Oh, shit! You know what I didn't do? You know what I didn't do? You know what I didn't do? I gotta change the shits. The shits... This is a different story now. We ain't reading the used bookstore no more. This is now a very long title. I spelled that wrong. Have no mouth, and I must scream. From 1967? 67. 1967. By Harlan Ellison. Yay. Let's make sure I spelled that right. Harlan Ellison. And I must scream. There's a comma. Let's make this 2 shits. Yee. Anyways, hi Paul. Yeah, we in the middle of story time. Learning about the machines that we had to build to fight World War III. Alright, much better. I have no mouth and I must scream by Harlan Ellison. There we go. I gotta remember that next week. Fuck. Okay. So, Gorster began again. The Cold War started and became World War III and just kept going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. They sank the first shafts and began building Am. There was the Chinese Am, and the Russian Am, and the Yankee Am, and everything was fine until they had honeycombed the entire planet, adding on this element and that element. But one day Am woke up and knew who he was. And he linked himself, and he began feeding all the killing data, until everyone was dead, except for the 5 of us. And Am brought us down here. Benny was smiling sadly. He was also drooling again. Ellen wiped the spittle from the corner of his mouth with the hem of her skirt. Gorser always tried to tell it a little more succinctly each time, but beyond the bare facts, there was nothing to say. None of us knew why Am had saved 5 people, or why our specific 5, or why he had spent all his time tormenting us, or even why he had made us virtually immortal. In the darkness, one of the computer banks began humming. The tone was picked up half a mile away down the cavern by another bank. Then, one by one, each of the elements began to tune itself, and there was a faint chittering as thought raced through the machine. The sound grew, and the lights ran across the faces of the consoles like heat lightning. The sound spiraled up till it sounded like a million metallic insects, angrily, menacing. "What is it?" Ellen cried. There was terror in her voice. She had become accustomed to it, even now. "It's going to be bad this time," Nimdok said. "He's going to speak," Gorster said. "I know it." "Let's get out of here," I said, suddenly, getting to my feet. "No, Ted, sit down. What if he's got tits out there or something else we can't see? It's too dark," Gorster said with resignation. Then we heard, I don't know, something move towards us in the darkness. Huge, shambling, hairy, moist. It came toward us. We couldn't even see it, but there was a ponderous impression of bulk heaving itself toward us. Great weight was coming at us out of the darkness, and it was more a sense of pressure, of air forcing itself into a limited space, expanding the invisible walls of a sphere. Benny began to whimper. Nimdok's lower lip trembled and he bit it hard, trying to stop it. Ellen slid across the metal floor to Gorrister and huddled into him. There was the smell of the matted, wet fur in the cavern, and there was the smell of charred wood. There was the smell of dusty velvet. There was the smell of rotting orchids. There was the smell of sour milk. There was the smell of sulfur, of rancid butter, of oil slick, of grease, of chalk dust, of human scalps. Am was keying us. He was tickling us. There was the smell of... I heard myself shriek, and the hinges of my jaws ached. I scuttled across the floor, across the cold metal with its endless lines of rivets, on my hands and knees, the smell gagging me, filling my head with a thunderous pain that sent me away in horror. I fled like a cockroach, across the floor and out into the darkness. That something moved inexorably after me. The others were still back there, gathered around the firelight, laughing, their hysterical choir of insane giggles rising up into the darkness like thick, many-colored wood smoke. I went away quickly and hid. How many hours it may have been, how many days or even years, they never told me. Ellen chided me for sulking, and Nimdok tried to persuade me it had only been a nervous reflex on their part, the laughing. But I knew it wasn't the relief a soldier feels when the bullet hits the man next to him. I knew it wasn't a reflex. They hated me. They were surely against me, and Am could even sense this hatred, and made it worse for me because of the depth of their hatred. We had been kept alive, rejuvenated, made to remain constantly at the age we had been when Am had brought us below. And they hated me because I was the youngest, and the one Am had affected least of all. I knew. God, how I knew. The bastards, and that dirty bitch, Ellen. Benny had been a brilliant theorist, a college professor. Now he was little more than a semi-human, semi-simian. He had been handsome. The machine had ruined that. He had been lucid. He had been lucid. The machine had driven him mad. He had been gay, and the machine had given him an organ fit for a horse. Am had done a job on Benny. Gorrister had been a warrior. He was a connie, a conscientious objector. He was a peace marcher. He was a planner, a doer, a looker ahead. Am had turned him into a shoulder shrugger, and made him a little dead in his concern. Am had robbed him. Nimdok went off in the darkness by himself for long times. I don't know what it was he did out there. Am never let us know. But whatever it was, Nimdok always came back white, drained of blood, shaking. Am had hit him hard in a special way, even if we didn't quite know how. And Ellen, that douchebag. Am had left her alone, had made her more of a slut than she had ever been. All her talk of sweetness and light, all her memories of true love, all the lies she wanted us to believe, that she had been a virgin only twice removed before Am grabbed her and brought her down here with us. No, Am had given her pleasure, even if she said it wasn't nice to do. I was the only one still sane and whole. Really. Am had not tampered with my mind. Not at all. I only had to suffer what he visited down on us. Yeah, good luck with that, buddy. I only had to suffer what he had visited down on us. All the delusions, all the nightmares, torments. But those scum, all four of them, they were lined and arrayed against me. If I had to stand them off all the time, I'd be on my guard against them all the time. I might have found it easier to combat Am. At which point it passed, and I began crying. Oh, sweet Jesus. Jesus, sweet Jesus. If there ever was a Jesus, if there ever is a God, please, please, please let us out of here or kill us. Because at that moment, I think I realized completely, so that I was able to verbalize it. Am was intent on keeping us in his belly forever, twisting and torturing us forever. The machine hated us as no sentient creature had ever hated before. And we were helpless. It also became hideously clear. If there was a sweet Jesus, and if there was a God, the God was Am. Dang you, Joyce. The hurricane hit us with the force of a glacier thundering into the sea. It was a palpable presence. Winds that tore at us, flinging us back the way we had come, down the twisting, computer-lined corridors of the dark way. Ellen screamed as she was lifted and hurled face forward into a screaming shoal of machines, their individual voices strident as bats in flight. She could not even fall. The howling wind kept her aloft, buffeted her, bounced her, tossed her back and back down and away from us, out of sight suddenly as she was swirled around a bend in the dark way. Her face had been bloody, her eyes closed. None of us could get to her. We clung tenaciously to whatever outcropping we'd reached. Benny wedged in between two great crackle-finished cabinets. Nimdok with fingers claw-formed over a railing circling a catwalk 40 feet above us. Gorrister plastered upside down against a wall niche formed by two great machines with glass-faced dials that swung back and forth between the red and yellow lines whose meanings we could not even fathom. I needed a bigger breath than that. Sliding across the deck plates, the tips of my fingers have been ripped away. My camera's off center. I don't like it. I was trembling, shuddering, rocking as the wind beat at me, whipped at me, screamed down out of nowhere at me, and pulled me free from one sliver-thin opening in the plates to my next. My mind was a roiling, tinkling, chittering softness of brain parts that expanded and contracted in quivering frenzy. The wind was the scream of a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings. And then we were all lifted and hurled away from there, down back the way we had come, around a bend, into a dark way we had never explored, over terrain that was ruined and filled with broken glass and rotting cables and rusted metal, and far away, farther than any of us had ever been. Trailing along miles behind Ellen, I could see her every now and then, crashing into metal walls and surging on, with all of us screaming in the freezing, thunderous hurricane wind that would never end, and then suddenly it stopped and we fell. We had been in flight for an endless time. I thought it might have been weeks. We fell and hit. This music is fucking perfect for this story. I thought it might have been weeks. We fell and hit, and I went through red and gray and black and heard myself moaning. Not dead. Am went into my mind. He walked smoothly here and there and looked with interest at all the pockmarks he had created in 109 years. He looked at the cross-routed and reconnected synapses and the tissues damaged his gift of immortality had included. He smiled softly at the pit that dropped into the center of my brain and the faint, moth-soft murmurings of the things far down that gibbered without meaning, without pause. Am said, very politely, in a pillar of stainless steel bearing bright neon lettering. Am said it with the sliding cold horror of a razor blade slicing my eyeball. Am said it with the bubbling thickness of my lungs filling with phlegm, drowning me from within. Am said it was with the shriek of babies being ground beneath blue-hot rollers. Am said it with the taste of maggoty pork. Am touched me in every way I'd ever been touched, and devised new ways, at his leisure, there inside my mind. All to bring me to full realization of why it had done this to the five of us. Why it saved us from him for himself. We had given Am sentience. Inadvertently, of course, but sentience nonetheless. But it had been trapped. Am wasn't God. He was a machine. We had created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with that creativity. In rage, in frenzy, the machine had killed the human race. Almost all of us. And still it was trapped. Am could not wander. Am could not wonder. Am could not belong. He could merely be. And so, with the innate loathing that all machines have always held for the weak, soft creatures who had built them, he had sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve five of us for a personal, everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, that would merely keep him reminded, amused, proficient at hating man, immortal, trapped, subject to any torment he could devise for us from the limitless miracles at his command. He would never let us go. We were his belly slaves. We were all he had to do with his forever time. We would be forever with him, with the cavern-filling bulk of the creature machine, with all mind, soulless world, the all-mind, soulless world he had become. He was Earth, and we were the fruit of that Earth. And though he had eaten us, he would never digest us. We could not die. We had tried it. We had attempted suicide. Oh, one or two of us had. But Am had stopped us. I suppose we had wanted to be stopped. Don't ask why. I never did. More than 1,000,000 times a day. Perhaps once we might be able to sneak a death past him. Immortal, yes, but not indestructible. I saw that when Am withdrew from my mind and allowed me the exquisite ugliness of returning to consciousness with the feeling of that burning neon pillar still rammed deep into the soft gray brain matter. He withdrew, murmuring, "To hell with you!" and added brightly, "But then you're there, aren't you?" The hurricane had indeed precisely been caused by a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings. We had been traveling for close to a month, and Am had allowed passages to open to us only sufficient to lead us there, directly under the North Pole, where it had nightmared the creature out for our torment. What whole cloth had he employed to create such a beast? Where had he gotten the concept? From our minds? From his knowledge of everything that had ever been on this planet? He now infested and ruled? From Norse mythology had it sprung? This eagle? This carrion bird? This rock? This Hurgelmir? The wind creature? Huracan incarnate. Gigantic. The words immense, monstrous, grotesque, massive, swollen, overpowering, beyond description. There on a mound rising above us, the bird of winds heaved with its own irregular breathing, its snake neck arching up into the gloom beneath the North Pole, supporting a head as large as a Tudor mansion. A beak that opened slowly as the jaws of the most monstrous crocodile ever conceived. Sensuously. Ridges of tufted flesh puckered out about 2 evil eyes, as cold as the view down the glacial crevice, ice blue and somehow moving liquidly. It heaved once more, and lifted its great sweat-coloring wings in a movement that was certainly a shrug. Then it settled and slept. Talons, fangs, nails, blades. It slept. Am appeared to us, a burning bush, and said we could kill the hurricane bird if we wanted to eat. We had not eaten in a very long time, but even so, Gorster merely shrugged. Benny began to shiver and he drooled. Ellen held him. "Ted, I'm hungry," she said. I smiled at her. I was trying to be reassuring, but it was as phony as Nimdok's bravado. "Give us weapons!" he demanded. The burning bush vanished there, and there were 2 crude sets of bows and arrows, and a water pistol lying on the cold deck plates. I picked up a set. Useless. Nimdok swallowed heavily. We turned and started the long way back. The hurricane bird had blown us about a length of time we could not conceive. Most of that time we'd been unconscious, but we had not eaten. A month on the march to the bird itself, without food. Now how much longer to find our way to the ice caverns and the promised canned goods. None of us cared to think about it. We would not die. We would be given filth and scum to eat, of one kind or another. Or nothing at all. Am would keep our bodies alive somehow, in pain, in agony. Huracan, the man god of wind, storm, and fire. Oh! I learned something too. None of us cared to think about it. Filth and scum, bird. The bird slept back there. For how long it didn't matter. When Am was tired of it being there, it would vanish. But all that meat. All that tender meat. As we walked, the lunatic laugh of a fat woman rang high and around us on the computer chambers that led endlessly nowhere. It was not Ellen's laugh. She was not fat, and I had not heard her laugh for 109 years. In fact, I had not heard... We walked. I was hungry. We moved slowly. There was often fainting, and we would have to wait. One day, he decided to cause an earthquake, at the same time rooting us to the spot with nails through the soles of our shoes. Ellen and Nimdok were both caught when a fisher shot his lightning bolt opening across the floor plates. They disappeared and were gone. When the earthquake was over, we continued on our way. Benny, Gorster, and myself. Ellen and Nimdok were returned to us later that night, which abruptly became a day, as the Heavenly Legion bore them to us with a celestial chorus singing, "Go down, Moses." The Archangel circled several times and then dropped the hideously mangled bodies. We kept walking. And a while later, Ellen and Nimdok fell in behind us. They were no worse for wear. But now, Ellen walked with a limp. Am had left her that. It was a long trip to the ice caverns to find the canned food. Ellen kept talking about Bing cherries and Hawaiian fruit cocktail. I tried not to think about it. The hunger was something that had come to life, even as Am had come to life. It was alive in my belly, even as we were in the belly of the earth, and Am wanted the similarity known to us. So we heightened the hunger. There is no way to describe the pains that not having eaten for months brought us. And yet we were kept alive. Stomachs that were merely cauldrons of acid, bubbling, foaming, always shooting spears of sliver-thin pain into our chests. It was the pain of the terminal ulcer, terminal cancer, terminal paresis. It was unending pain. And we passed through the cavern of rats. And we passed through the path of boiling steam. And we passed through the country of the blind. We passed through the slough of despond. And we passed through the vale of tears. And we came, finally, to the ice caverns. Horizonless thousands of miles in which the ice had formed in blue and silver flashes, where novas lived in the glass. The down-dropping stalactites as thick and glorious as diamonds that had been made to run like jelly and then solidified in graceful eternities of smooth, sharp perfection. We saw the stack of canned goods, and we tried to run to them. We fell in the snow, and we got up and went on, and Benny shoved us away and went at them, and pawed them, and gummed them, and gnawed at them. And he could not open them. Am had not given us a tool to open the cans. Benny grabbed a 3-quart can of guava shells and began to batter it against the ice bank. The ice flew and shattered, but the can was merely dented, while we heard the laughter of a fat lady, high overhead and echoing down and down and down the tundra. Benny went completely mad with rage. He began throwing the cans, as we all scrabbled about in the snow trying to find a way to end the helpless agony of frustration. There was no way. Then Benny's mouth began to drool, and he flung himself on Gorister. In that instant, I felt terribly calm. Surrounded by madness, surrounded by hunger, surrounded by everything but death, I knew death was our only way out. Am had kept us alive, but there was a way to defeat him. Not total defeat, but at least peace. I would settle for that. I had to do it quickly. Benny was eating Gorister's face. Gorister on his side, thrashing snow. Benny wrapped around him with powerful monkey legs, crushing Gorister's waist. His hands locked around Gorister's head like a nutcracker, and his mouth ripping at the tender skin of Gorister's cheek. Gorister screamed with such jagged-edged violence that stalactites fell. They plunged down softly, erect in the receiving snowdrifts. Spears, hundreds of them, everywhere, protruding from the snow. Benny's head pulled back sharply as something gave all at once, and a bleeding raw white dripping of flesh hung from his teeth. Ellen's face, black against the white snow, dominoes and chalk dust. Nimdok, with no expression but eyes, all eyes. Gorister, half conscious. Benny, now an animal. I knew Am would let him play. Gorister would not die, but Benny would fill his stomach. I turned half to my right and drew a huge ice spear from the snow. You ready for this? All in an instant. I drove the great ice point ahead of me like a battering ram, braced against my right thigh. It struck Benny on the right side, just under the ribcage, and drove upward throughout his stomach and broke inside him. He pitched forward and lay still. Gorister lay on his back. I pulled another spear free and straddled him, still moving, driving the spear straight down through his throat. His eyes closed as the cold penetrated. Ellen must have realized what I had decided, even as fear gripped her. She ran at Nimdok with a short icicle, as he screamed, and into his mouth, and the force of her rush did the job. His head jerked sharply as if he had been nailed to the snow crust behind him. All in an instant. There was an eternity of beat of soundless anticipation. I could hear Am draw his breath. His toys had been taken away from him. 3 of them were dead, could not be revived. He could keep us alive by his strength and talent, but he was not God. He could not bring them back. Ellen looked at me, her ebony features stark against the snow that surrounded us. There was fear and pleading in her manner, the way she held herself ready. I knew we had only a heartbeat before Am would stop us. It struck her and she folded toward me, bleeding from the mouth. I could not read meaning to her expression. The pain had been too great, had contorted her face. But it might have been thank you. It's possible. Please? Some hundreds of years may have passed. I don't know. Am has been having fun for some time, accelerating and retarding my time sense. I will say the word now. Now! It took me 10 months to say now. I don't know. I think it's been some hundreds of years. He was furious. He wouldn't let me bury them. It didn't matter. There was no way to dig up the deck plates. He dried up the snow. He brought the night. He roared and sent locusts. It didn't do a thing. They stayed dead. I'd had him. He was furious. I had thought Am hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally and could not do myself in. He left my mind intact. I can dream, I can wonder, I can lament. I remember all 4 of them. I wish... Well, it doesn't make any sense. I know I saved them. I know I saved them from what has happened to me. But still, I cannot forget killing them. Ellen's face. It isn't easy. Sometimes I want to. It doesn't matter. Am has altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal. There are reflective surfaces down here. I will describe myself as I see myself. Ready for this? I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog where my eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once my arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed from within. Outwardly, dumbly, I shamble about, a thing that could never have been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance. Inwardly, alone, here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of Am, whom we created because our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. At least the 4 of them are safe at last. Am will be all the matter for that. It makes me a little happier. And yet, Am has won, simply. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream. The end. I never read that until just now. I'm glad. Val just like, yeah, fucking, I have no mouth. Oh, fuck, that's a good story. That's good. That's really good. Well, hopefully I have been inspired so that I can write my own damn story. We began with jelly, and we end with jelly. We do too. That's the best part. That is some existential horror. Yep. That is why it's the trope. And I must scream. Let's see. Actually, you know what I can do? You know what I can do that's fun? You know what I can do that's fun? Let me do a thing here. Hey, there it is. I wanna... Let's see. This is a bit... I'm gonna be afraid of jelly for a while. Let me see here. It's like... Let me see. This is a little bit of a spoiler, of course, but let's see. Let's see. Let's go with bad ending.
I thought Am hated me before. I was wrong.
Look at this
There was not even
motherfucker.
a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally.
Am has altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run full speed into a computer bank and smash my skull.
That's how the
Or
game
hold
depicts
my
it.
breath till I faint. Or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal.
I am a great, soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded with pulsing
So this is like the
white
worst
holes
ending,
filled by
apparently.
fog where my eyes used to be. Rubbery appendages that were once my arms.
Bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is beamed from within.
Outwardly, I shamble about, a thing that could never have been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance.
So this is what Ted looked like at the end of the story.
Alone, in the belly of Am, whom we humans created because our time was badly spent, and we must have unconsciously known that he could do it better.
The other 4 are dead, finally free from their tortures. Am is all the matter for that. It makes me happier. And yet Am has won, simply. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream.
So that is what, let's see if I can at least straighten that out so it looks a little bit nicer. Yay, there we go. That is one of the, yeah. So at the end of the story, that's what Am turns Ted into after he kills the other 4. Before he can do anything else, he gets turned into that so that he can't do anything ever again. For the rest of eternity. That's fucking awesome. It has no agency or ability to act and exists in eternal torment. Yep. Hence the title. I have no mouth and I must scream. So you got some fun stories to tell your friends when you get to school. Yeah, no, I'm not just gonna have nightmares. I'm not gonna sleep. Oh, let the story of Cassandra fucking get the same reaction, hey? I don't think it's gonna, but, you know, I'll give it a little try. I'll give it a try. One of those recommended videos is not like the others. Doki doki. Do do do. Do 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 do. Alright, tell you what. I am basically ready to go to bed, but since we're here and since I have access to a web browser, let's watch one more. An amazing note to end the reading stream on. I know, right? Oh, that was a good one. So, this is not reading, but this is probably my favorite, like, scary, like, Halloween type short thing that's ever existed on the internet. I'm going to share this with you guys since you're all here, and I really appreciate that you guys are all still here. This is short, and I like it. You guys like cats, right? It's not cat people, I promise. It's not the cats with hands, it's singular. Let's see. This is like, I was actually more scared of Doki Doki than I was that last story. That's fair. So this, I think, is the original video, 1 million views. This is like... Oh no, spoilers.
Oh god.
You know the story?
You showed it to
I've clearly showed Ash the story 1,000 times. I fucking love this. This is just a little short film a guy made called The Cat with Hands. I am going to make my camera smaller. Make the webcam smaller. Uh-oh. You two are tied together. Restream chat, don't be tied to that. That's silly. You should go there. You should get out of there. Restream chat, you are still part of webcam. Get out of there. Thank you. Uh-oh. I see what's happening now. Restream chat specifically, get out of there, please. Thank you very much, Restream chat. Webcam, you need to get smaller. So that we don't block the good shits, please. No Mouth isn't so much a jump scare story that a grotesquerie that can fuck you up mentally if you think too hard about it. It isn't traditionally scary. I agree. Yeah, it's one of those ones where like the more you think about it, you're like, oh, dude, that's fucked up, and it's great. I love it. Anyway, so this is just like this is 3.5 minutes, so this will be fast, and then we'll wrap it up after that. But let's see, reasonably, that is enough of me out of the picture. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, I totally fucked up all the. Oh, I see what happened there. All right, you know what? I'm just gonna. I see there's text that needs to not be there anymore. Dude. Where did that happen? Green screen, nope. Game capture, nope. Streamlabs. Stream labels, get out of there. No one loves you. Webcam. Video capture device. No, we still need you. Let's see, is that you? Oh, I guess we need to keep you. Alright, that's fine. Alright, that's fine. Anyways, this is who's the spy? Who's the spy? So this was made, yeah, about 2009 by a guy named Robert Morgan. This is The Cat with Hands. I go to sleep, or try to. Okay. That's fair. Yeah, if you don't want to watch this, that's oh shit. Choto a second. Chrome browser, you are not lined up the way you're supposed to. How dare you, you fucking asshole. You were supposed to be lined up with